My name is Nicole, and I'm a 34-year-old hairdresser. I've been honing my skills as the chief stylist at the salon owned by my husband Michael, who's just a few years older than me. Our story began through a mutual connection, and I was instantly drawn to Michael's warm and approachable demeanor. 4 years ago, we sealed our bond in marriage. However, there's a significant player in our lives. My husband's mother, Victoria. Divorced during Michael's junior high years, she proudly raised him single-handedly. While I admire her strength, Victoria's unwavering belief in her authority over Michael's life can be suffocating. When we tied the knot, she insisted on asserting her opinions on everything from the wedding arrangements to our choice of honeymoon destination and even the decor of our new home. I had my own dreams for our special moments like the wedding ceremony and honeymoon, not to mention our future abroad. Yet whenever I dared to voice my desires, Victoria swiftly shut them down. Even Michael's attempts to mediate were met with her firm assertion of dominance, often accompanied by the reminder of her role as his mother. It's like tossing pearls before swine, as the saying goes. You don't need such an extravagant wedding dress. Honestly, if you're behaving like this now, I shudder to think about our future together. What kind of upbringing did your parents give you? With those words, she not only dismissed my preferences, but also insulted my parents. It left me anxious about what lay ahead. My parents, ever the voice of reason, suggested, take a moment to reconsider. I'm deeply sorry for my mother's intrusion. Her behavior was uncalled for, but I am committed to building a happy family with Nicole. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, will you bless our union? Michael's apology was sincere, and in that moment, both my parents and I felt assured that he would stand by me in the years to come. And so, we decided to proceed with the marriage. From the wedding ceremony to our new home, every decision was dictated by my mother-in-law's preferences. At home, my own mother advised, sometimes it's best to concede now for a better future. I understand you're trying to maintain harmony with your mother-in-law, but by yielding now, you're actually positioning yourself to collect on her debt in the future, leveraging her advice. Reluctantly, I acquiesced, but now, 4 years later, I rue that decision more deeply than the ocean and loftier than the mountains. Michael, can we discuss something about work? I have a junior chamber meeting tonight. Yesterday was a shopping district gathering, and today's another meeting. Last week was filled with dinners and social events. When do we have time to sit down and talk? Isn't every event part of your business? I'm not criticizing. You sound like you're complaining. Now that we have 3 stores, it's only logical that we discuss various aspects of management, isn't it? I have entrusted everything regarding the stores to you, Nicole. Your one commendable trait, without any formal education or prestigious family background, is your talent as a hairdresser. Thus, it's only natural for you to focus on boosting sales, right? So, why do you act like you need my input? Doesn't that seem odd? Here we go again. 4 years have passed since we launched our hair salon business from scratch. With the successful opening of our 3rd store and plans for a 4th by year-end, it's a significant milestone. However, as our business expands and Michael garners praise as a young entrepreneur, he increasingly regards me with disdain. I can handle him commenting on my education and background, but his constant belittling, criticizing everything from my appearance to my fashion sense, and even comparing me to rival stylists is just too much. What's worse, if I have to postpone a task he's asked for or don't respond to his messages right away, he gives me the silent treatment. During these times, he stays out late, disregards the meals I've prepared, and ostentatiously opts for takeout or convenience store sandwiches and coffee. He spends more time at his mother's place, even taking baths there. At first, I didn't know how to break through his silence. I kept cooking and preparing everything as if he would come home hungry and tired, even though I knew he wouldn't. I'd stay up late, anxiously waiting for him to return, uncertain of when he'd be back. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law would launch her verbal attacks. I always knew you weren't good enough for Michael, but I never imagined you'd be this incompetent. Why is he ignoring me? What have you done? Do you really have no idea? It's unbelievable. Are you mad at me for something I did? If Michael told you something, please tell me. It's pointless to talk to someone who's clueless about their own flaws, isn't it? With a laugh, she leaves me without an answer, after enduring his silent treatment for a while, just when I'm about to lose my patience. I'm home. Oh, I'm starving. What's on the menu tonight? He strolls in casually, as if nothing had happened earlier. I'm relieved he's speaking to me, but deep down, I dread being ignored again. Unconsciously, I find myself bending over backward to please Michael, catering to his every mood. It wasn't until Rebecca, a new stylist who joined the company this spring, pointed it out to me one day that I realized the extent of it all. That particular day, Michael was, as usual, ignoring me, skipping meals and remaining silent. Not wanting the food I had prepared to go to waste, I packed his leftovers into a lunchbox and brought it to the store. While I was eating it for lunch, Rebecca approached me. "Hey, Nicole, did you make that lunchbox yourself?" Yeah. It's just some leftovers from yesterday, though. I don't mean to pry into personal matters, especially as a newcomer, but do you realize that Michael seems to be controlling you? What do you mean by control? What are you getting at? I might be overstepping, but isn't Michael completely ignoring you right now? Yeah, he is. I had a feeling something was off. I noticed him chatting and laughing with everyone else in the staff room, but completely ignoring you. And that incident where he rudely brushed off your hand when nobody was looking, it was clear as day. And then there's that lunchbox, filled with just grilled mackerel and meat and potatoes. It's obvious you just packed last night's dinner leftovers, right? It's a far cry from your usual colorful, well-balanced lunches. After Rebecca's observations, memories of my mother's similar experiences flooded back. She went through the same ordeal before divorcing my biological father. Hearing Rebecca's story, I learned that her parents split during her freshman year of high school, with her father often subjecting her mother to the same silent treatment as Michael. It all began with trivial things, gradually escalating until it seemed like a switch had been flipped, and he completely shut her out. My mother endured countless tears. I see. In time, she began seeking my father's approval in everything, her once bright smile turning submissive. It was agonizing to witness. Rebecca explained that Michael's silent treatment was a tactic to control me, leaving me worried and insecure while he maintained a position of dominance, smirking all the while. Think about it. In a healthy relationship, if your partner is upset, you'd be concerned and hurt too. But people like Michael, they actually relish in seeing their partner distressed and vulnerable. It's sickening. After Rebecca's candid insight, I found myself losing the urge to panic as I once did, even amidst Michael's moodiness and his habit of ignoring me or my mother-in-law's persistent prodding. Instead, viewing the situation through that lens, I began to see only Michael's immaturity, his overwhelming self-centeredness, and my mother-in-law's unrelenting malice, with no attempts to rein him in. But it seemed they didn't appreciate my newfound perspective. The chilling silence from both Michael and my mother-in-law gradually became routine. He scarcely came home anymore, and when he did, he'd seclude himself in his room. He stopped appearing at both the store and the company, leaving me to handle everything alone. Then, on a day like any other, a rare day off for the store, I decided to thoroughly clean our house for the first time in ages. Usually I relied on the Roomba and Brava, but with the pleasant weather, I figured I'd tackle every nook and cranny for a change. Lost in thought, I began wiping the windows while my favorite music played from my smartphone. That's when Michael and my mother-in-law silently entered the house, unlocking the door with a click as they settled onto the living room sofa. As my husband and mother-in-law sat there, I decided to quickly brew some tea. What an inconsiderate wife you are. But can't we bid farewell to this type of wife soon? It'll be a breath of fresh air. That's what they remarked as I reluctantly prepared the tea and set it on the sofa table, feeling bewildered. You see, Michael is expecting a child now, so it's time for you to step aside and make a swift exit. We'll give you a grace period of about 2 weeks to vacate this apartment. And naturally, you'll need to resign from your job as well, without any severance pay, of course. That's what they declared. Michael is having a child? Does that mean he's been unfaithful? And I'm being asked to leave. I'm losing my job with no severance pay either. Though we were in a silent standoff as a couple, my mind raced with questions upon hearing this sudden news, struggling to process it all. The next wife will be quite different from you. She hails from a wealthy family, graduated from a prestigious women's college, and then trained in the beauty capital, Paris. You simply can't compete with her, so it's best to accept it now. Ha! She's 3 months pregnant, and I'm eager to provide her with security as my wife soon. Indeed, I'm looking forward to it. Without a doubt, a wonderful child will be born. They uttered whatever they please. So, if she's 3 months pregnant, does that mean the child is a product of infidelity? Yeah, and? Emily and I just met in the wrong order. We were truly connected by the red thread of fate. So, you want me to leave because you want to marry your supposed soulmate now? That's been the gist of it. You're a bit slow on the uptake. As I watched Michael and my mother-in-law's nonchalant demeanor, a headache began to throb at my temples. Finally, I mustered the strength to request some time alone to contemplate, asking them to leave. It seems it takes time to grasp things with a scattered mind like yours. We understand, they replied before retreating to my mother-in-law's quarters. Left alone, I found myself unable to resume cleaning and instead sank onto the floor. Yet amidst the dimness, I noticed my smartphone's screen illuminating with an incoming call. It was from Rebecca. Rebecca? Oh, Nicole, are you at home right now? Yeah, I am. With my brief response, Rebecca announced she was on her way over and promptly ended the call. About half an hour later, Rebecca arrived, her hands full with bulging eco bags. Sorry for barging in. I grabbed some random food and drinks for us, she announced cheerfully. After excusing herself to wash her hands, she swiftly arranged the deli food she brought onto the table. She fetched glasses from the kitchen, poured some craft beer, her newfound favorite, and declared, "Let's dig in before it gets cold," while handing me a spoon. Following her lead, I began to eat, savoring the fluffy omelette rice that filled my mouth. Tasty, isn't it? This place makes fantastic omelette rice, she remarked with a bright smile. I've brought a variety of things, so please take your time and enjoy them. It dawned on me that I had only had coffee and bread for breakfast, hardly constituting a proper meal. Despite being emotionally numb until then, hunger gnawed at me. It was a realization that struck me for the first time. We ate in silence for a while, and as we began to sip our beer, Rebecca brought up the safety group email from the boss, mentioning my departure from the store at the end of the month. I confided in her about my mother-in-law and Michael's demand for a divorce, followed by my decision to resign from the store. Rebecca fell silent for a moment upon hearing my response, but then she looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "What do you want, Nicole? I mean, what do you truly desire? Not what they dictate you should do. It's your life, Nicole. You're the one who decides which path to take. You should steer towards what you want." Those words from Rebecca brought an unexpected clarity to my heart. Let's get a divorce. There's not a single reason why I should remain with Michael and his family. I want a divorce. I want to start afresh, I replied resolutely. Michael had given me a 10-day grace period, but once I set my plans in motion, everything proceeded smoothly. With few personal belongings, I swiftly packed them into boxes provided by the moving company. I entrusted Rebecca with handling my belongings at the store, preferring not to face Michael until everything was settled. Simultaneously, I engaged a lawyer recommended by an acquaintance to draft documents demanding alimony and property division from Michael. After several property viewings, I signed a contract for a new place. Once the move was complete, I had the lawyer send documents to my mother-in-law. Shortly after the letter arrived, my inbox flooded with line messages and emails from both my mother-in-law and Michael. Deciding to address matters formally, I proposed a meeting at the lawyer's office. As I waited at the lawyer's office, my mother-in-law, Michael, and a young woman entered, all wearing smug smiles. When the lawyer inquired about the woman's identity, my mother-in-law spoke up, introducing her as Emily, who would soon become Michael's wife after our divorce. They appeared delighted. Unfazed, I simply asked if they would agree to our demands. Without hesitation, they agreed, viewing it as severance payment. "Consider it compensation for your future," Michael added kindly. They handed over the specified amount in cash, sealed in a bank envelope. I completed my section of the divorce papers, stamped them, and handed them over, bringing the process to an end. As we parted ways, I made it clear that I would not assist them in any way in the future, no matter what happened. "So, this is your last desperate plea." "Okay, get it, you're upset. No need for the sarcasm," Emily retorted before they all exited the office, laughing. These days, I'm thriving as a top stylist at a bustling salon in the city center. Rebecca, who's been by my side since last month, is the same Rebecca who helped me see the truth during that crucial moment at the lawyer's office. I wasted no time in finding a new job, leveraging my past accolades and online recognition to secure a position swiftly. Thanks to this, I can live comfortably without relying on the consolation money or property division. Plus, I've started seeing someone I met at a joint training session with the sister store of my current workplace. Each day feels remarkably liberating and stress-free. So, When's the next date? Hey, don't tease your elders. Rebecca stayed on at Michael's salon for a while after I left. Ultimately, I convinced her to quit immediately. My decision was twofold: to safeguard Rebecca's reputation as a newcomer, avoiding any perception of impatience or lack of cooperation, and to shield her from any potential targeting by Michael and his mother, knowing she was still my friend. Reluctantly, Rebecca remained at the salon, and from what she's told me, the aftermath of Michael, his mother, and Emily was akin to a roller coaster drama. Emily strutted into the salon after my divorce, brimming with confidence as the new top stylist and field manager, but her reign was short-lived, lasting only a single day. The male staff member who had previously worked under me turned out to be Emily's classmate. Unaware of this, Emily made a grand entrance at the salon, accompanied by Michael, boasting about her Parisian training. "Wow, Emily, I thought you must be some extraordinary talent since you claim to have returned from Paris. But here you are," Thomas remarked. Thomas, what are you doing here?" Emily asked, taken aback. "I could ask you the same. I'm genuinely surprised. You were always struggling with the written tests, constantly getting reprimanded by the teacher. How did you, Emily, who barely made it through, end up in Paris?" "That's not true, is it?" "Don't make up stories, Thomas," Emily countered defensively. Well, don't you need a French hairstylist license to work in Paris? When did you suddenly become fluent in French like a native speaker?" Thomas persisted. "Well, I studied at university, didn't I?" "University? Wow," Emily replied, somewhat flustered. The Emily who once claimed to struggle with English during elective French conversations at beauty school found her disguise completely unraveling. A heated argument ensued between Emily, Michael, and Emily's mother-in-law, who rushed onto the scene. Things escalated, leading to a call to the police. The ensuing chaos prompted staff members to leave one by one, draining the salon of its vitality. Customers began to trickle away, and soon, the business hit rock bottom. Forced to shut down 2 of their stores, they attempted to salvage what they could at the original location, but it was too little too late. Last month, they were forced to close down completely. That must have been incredibly challenging. It was, but because of that, I was able to present my departure from the company as due to business circumstances, making the job interview process here much smoother. I'm glad we're working together again, but why did you choose this salon? Naturally, it's to learn directly from Nicole's expertise. Got it. I'll make sure to train you thoroughly. Sometime after Rebecca changed jobs, a letter arrived from Michael and his mother, delivered through the lawyer handling our divorce. It seemed they had no other means to reach me after I severed all communication, and even my parents staunchly refused contact. The letter droned on about how they had been duped by Emily, revealing that she wasn't pregnant after all, and that her entire background was fabricated. Emily had absconded with everything valuable, leaving Thomas in the lurch shortly after they lost the salon and the apartment they had used as collateral. The letter concluded with a plea for my help, painting me as their only hope in their time of need. After skimming through the letter, I promptly called the lawyer who had passed it on to me. "Please just let them know I'm not interested. There's no need to relay any more messages from them." And so, as Rebecca had assured me before, my life, charted in the direction I desired, was flourishing. I vowed never to allow another man to dictate my fate.
I'm Kimberly, and this is the story of how my family fell apart. It all started when I was 7 years old, and my little brother Tommy turned 5. I remember the day clearly. Mom had taken Tommy to his first real music lesson. When they came back, she was practically floating on air. "Kim, come here," she called out, her voice high with excitement. I came running down the stairs, wondering what all the fuss was about. "Your brother is a musical genius." I didn't really know what that meant, but I could tell it was important. "That's great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "The teacher says he has perfect pitch," Mom continued, her eyes shining. "Do you know how rare that is? He's going to be a star, I just know it." From that day on, it was all about Tommy. Mom quit her part-time job to focus on his career. She'd spend hours researching music competitions and TV shows for kids. Our living room turned into a mini recording studio, with a keyboard, microphone, and even a small karaoke machine. Don't get me wrong, Tommy was good, When he sang, his voice was clear and pure, like a little angel. But I couldn't help feeling left out. Mom was too wrapped up in Tommy's potential stardom, and Dad, well, Dad was barely around. He'd leave for work before I woke up and come home after I was in bed. On weekends, he'd tinker in the garage or watch TV, too exhausted to do much else. So, I learned to take care of myself. I'd make my own lunches, do my homework without being asked, and try not to bother anyone with my problems. It wasn't all bad, though. I had my books, my few close friends, and my grandma. Grandma was Mom's mother, but they couldn't have been more different. While Mom was all about the spotlight and fame, Grandma was down-to-earth and practical. She owned a small convenience store in town, and I started helping out there after school when I was 12. "You're a good worker, Kimberly," she'd say, smiling at me over her glasses. "Smart with money, too. That'll serve you well in life." Those words meant more to me than all the vague praise I got at home. At least someone saw me for who I was, not just as Tommy's sister. Speaking of Tommy, he was thriving under Mom's attention. By the time he was 7, he'd already won a few local singing competitions. Mom would come home, waving his trophies and certificates, her face glowing with pride. "Did you see Tommy on TV last night?" she'd ask me, not waiting for an answer. The judges said he was the most talented child they'd seen in years. I'd nod and smile, trying to be happy for my brother. But I couldn't help the twinge of jealousy when I saw how differently we were treated. Tommy had the latest toys and gadgets, while I had to save up my allowance for months to buy anything I wanted. As I entered high school, the divide between Tommy and me grew even wider. While I attended the local public school, Mom enrolled Tommy in an expensive private academy known for its music program. Every morning, she'd drop him off in our beat-up minivan, fussing over his uniform and reminding him about his after-school voice lessons. Meanwhile, I'd be halfway to school already, having caught the early bus. One day, after a particularly grueling day of classes and a shift at Grandma's store, I came home to find Mom and Tommy sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by brochures and flyers. "What's all this?" I asked, dropping my backpack by the door. Mom looked up, her eyes shining with excitement. "Oh, Kim, you won't believe it. Tommy's been invited to audition for the National Youth Choir. The audition's in New York. We'll need to buy new clothes, book flights, a hotel." I couldn't help but ask, "Can we afford all that?" Mom's smile faltered for a moment. "We'll manage. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Tommy. We can't let it pass by." I nodded, knowing better than to argue. But as I headed up to my room, I couldn't help but wonder, what about my opportunities? It wasn't that I was jealous of Tommy's talent. I was proud of him, in a way. But I was tired of being an afterthought in my own family. That night, I heard Mom and Dad arguing in their bedroom. Their voices were muffled, but I could make out enough to know it was about money. "We're already in debt, Linda," Dad was saying. "We can't keep spending like this." "But this could be Tommy's big break," Mom insisted. "Don't you want him to succeed?" "Of course I do," Dad sighed. "But what about Kim? We haven't put aside anything for her college fund." There was a pause, and then Mom's voice, softer now, "Kim's smart. She'll get scholarships. Besides, she's always been independent. She'll figure something out." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, their words echoing in my head. "She'll figure something out." That's what it always came down to, didn't it? I was expected to fend for myself while they poured everything into Tommy's future. The next day, I went to work at Grandma's store. As I was restocking shelves, Grandma called me over to the counter. "Kimberly," she said, her voice gentle. "Is everything all right? You seem distracted today." I hesitated for a moment, then the whole story came spilling out: Tommy's audition, the money problems, my fears about college. Grandma listened patiently, her face growing more concerned with each word. When I finished, she shook her head. "Listen, I've been thinking. You're a hard worker, Kimberly. How would you like to start earning a real wage here at the store? Not just pocket money, but something you could save for your future. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen and appreciated. As I hugged my grandmother, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could create my own opportunities. I didn't need to wait for someone else to invest in my future. With Grandma's help, I could start investing in myself. As the years went by, I threw myself into my studies and my work at Grandma's store. By the time I was 15, I'd managed to save up a decent amount. My goal? A laptop for school. One Friday afternoon, I decided to count my savings. I went to my closet and pulled out the pink ceramic piggy bank Grandma had given me years ago. But when I shook it, something felt off. The familiar jingle of coins was missing. My heart racing, I opened the bottom and turned it over. Nothing, not a single coin fell out. With shaking hands, I made my way downstairs. Tommy was sprawled on the couch, playing video games on a shiny new console. "Hey, Tommy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You haven't seen my piggy bank, have you? Or the money inside it?" He barely glanced up from his game. "Nope, sorry." I took a deep breath and headed to the kitchen, where Mom was preparing dinner. "Mom," I began, Did you take the money from my piggy bank?" She turned to me, her face calm. "Oh, that. Yes, I did." Tommy needed a new game console. His old one broke, and he was so upset. "I knew you had some savings, so I took it." I stood there, speechless. Tears were threatening to spill, but I refused to let them fall. When will you pay me back?" I managed to ask. Mom sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "We'll see. Times are tight right now, with all of Tommy's expenses. You understand, don't you? This is an investment in his future." I didn't understand. I couldn't understand how she could do this to me. Without another word, I turned and ran out of the house. I kept running until I reached Grandma's store, tears blurring my vision. Grandma took one look at me and flipped the open sign to closed. She led me to the back room and sat me down. "What happened, Kimberly?" she asked gently. Between sobs, I told her everything. As I spoke, I watched Grandma's face change from concern to disbelief to anger. "What am I going to do, Grandma?" I asked, feeling more lost than ever. "I can't trust them." Grandma was quiet for a moment, then she stood up. "Wait here," she said. She disappeared into the front of the store. When she came back, she was carrying a laptop box. "I was saving this for your birthday," she said, placing the box in my lap. "But I think you need it now. Just don't take this home. Keep it here at the store. Use it after your shifts or on weekends. I don't want your mother getting her hands on this too." That night, as I lay in bed, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. I would work harder, save more, and find a way out of this house where I felt like a stranger. My 16th birthday rolled around with little fanfare. Mom remembered the date this time, at least. She and Dad wished me a happy birthday over breakfast, Dad sliding a card across the table before rushing off to work. I invited a few close friends. We set up some folding tables in the backyard, strung up some lights, and had a pretty good time. I'd saved up from my job at Grandma's store to buy snacks and drinks. My best friend Rachel helped me decorate with some balloons and streamers we got from the dollar store. As we sat around, eating chips and laughing about school drama, I caught myself feeling genuinely happy. For a moment, I could forget about the family dynamics and just be a normal teenager celebrating her birthday. But reality has a way of creeping back in. When Tommy's 16th birthday came around 2 years later, it was an extravaganza. They rented out the fanciest restaurant in town, invited what seemed like half the city, and even hired a professional photographer. The cherry on top? A shiny new car parked outside with a big red bow. I stood off to the side during the party, watching Tommy beam as he accepted congratulations and gifts. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to resent him. This wasn't his fault. He was just living the life our parents, especially Mom, had orchestrated for him. A few months later, I was thrilled to learn I'd been accepted to study economics at a college in the next state. Even better, I'd earned a partial scholarship. But as I soon discovered, partial was the operative word. The scholarship wouldn't cover all my expenses. With trepidation, I approached my parents one evening. "Mom, Dad," I began. "I got into State University for economics. I have a scholarship, but I'll need some help with the rest of the tuition and living expenses." Dad looked up from his newspaper, a crease between his brows. "That's great news about the scholarship, Kim. But you know money's tight right now. With Tommy's music school fees." Mom jumped in. "Kimberly, you're a smart girl. I'm sure you can figure something out. Maybe get a job? You've always been so independent." Defeated, I retreated to my room. As I sat on my bed, staring at the acceptance letter, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Grandma, asking how the conversation with my parents went. I called her back, my voice shaking as I recounted what had happened. Grandma listened quietly, then said, "Kimberly, don't you worry. We'll figure this out together." True to her word, Grandma set up a college fund for me. Between that, my scholarship, and a part-time job I picked up at a cafe near campus, I managed to make it work. "You're going to do great things, Kimberly," Grandma said. "I'm so proud of you." Those words carried me through the tough times in college. When I was up late studying, or pulling double shifts at the cafe, I'd remember Grandma's faith in me and push through. I called Tommy occasionally, trying to keep our connection alive. He was at a prestigious music college, all expenses paid by our parents, of course. Despite the differences in our situations, it was nice to hear his voice, to know that at least one person in that house might be missing me. After 4 grueling years of balancing studies, work, and tight budgets, I finally graduated with my degree in economics. Armed with my hard-earned qualifications and a determination to succeed, I returned to my hometown. It wasn't long before I landed a job at a prestigious financial firm and found a small but comfortable apartment to rent. Life settled into a pleasant routine. Work was challenging but rewarding, and in my free time, I started to build a life for myself outside of my family's shadow. I made new friends, took up hiking on weekends, and even started dating a bit. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my mother standing there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. She stepped inside, wringing her hands. "Kimberly, I need your help." Those words sent a chill down my spine. In all my years, I couldn't remember my mother ever asking for my help. "What's wrong?" I asked, leading her to the couch. She sat down heavily, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sick, Kim, really sick. The doctors, they say I need treatment, but our insurance won't cover it all." My heart dropped. Despite everything, she was still my mother. "How much do you need?" $15,000, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's a lot, but I didn't know where else to turn. Your father and we've spent everything on Tommy's education. We thought it would pay off by now, but... The next morning, we drove to the bank in silence. As we waited in line, Mom started talking, her voice low. "You know, Tommy's doing so well," she said. "He's got offers from several big music groups. Once he signs, we'll be able to pay you back in no time." I nodded, only half listening. My mind was racing, thinking about how I'd manage the loan repayments on top of my rent and other expenses. After signing what felt like a mountain of paperwork, I transferred the $15,000 to my mother's account. As we left the bank, she hugged me tightly. A few days later, I was scrolling through my social media feed during my lunch break when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was Tommy, my brother, posting selfies from the Swiss Alps. Confused, I quickly sent him a message. "Hey Tommy, aren't you supposed to be in school? What are you doing in Switzerland?" His reply came quickly, "Oh, hey Kim. Yeah, Mom surprised me with this trip. Said I was having a creative block and needed to recharge. It's amazing here. I'm staying for 2 months. I stared at my phone, my mind refusing to process what I was reading. 2 months in Switzerland? Creative block? Then it hit me. The $15,000 loan. It wasn't for medical treatment, it was for Tommy's vacation. With shaking hands, I called my mother. Kimberly, what is it now? Her voice was irritated, as if I was interrupting something important. I took a deep breath. Mom, we need to talk about the loan. About Tommy's trip. How could you lie to me like that? There was a pause, then she sighed. Now, listen here. Your brother is a creative person. He needs constant inspiration and pampering to open up creatively. This trip was essential for his career. He's going to be famous, and we all need to support him. Support him? I echoed, my voice rising. By taking out loans we can't afford? By lying to your other child? Oh, don't be such a miser, she scoffed. You should be happy to support your brother. That was the last straw. Mom, I want the money back. All of it. Now. Her laugh was cold. Don't be ridiculous, Kimberly. The money's spent. Besides, you're doing well enough. You don't need it. If you don't pay me back, I said, my voice shaking with anger, I'll sue you. There was a moment of stunned silence, then she exploded. Sue me? Your own mother? You're a terrible daughter. I can't believe I raised such a selfish, heartless child. This is your last chance, Mom, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Pay me back, or I'm going to court. Go ahead, she spat. See if I care. You're dead to me, Kimberly. Dead. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, shaking with a mix of anger and shock. I'd known this conversation wouldn't go well, but I never imagined it would end like this. In a daze, I called the one person I knew I could always count on, Grandma. I broke down, sobbing as I recounted everything that had happened. Grandma listened patiently, making soothing noises as I poured out my heart. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Grandma spoke, her voice firm. Kimberly, listen to me. What your mother did was wrong. If you decide to go through with this, I'll support you. I know a good lawyer, my friend's son. He might be willing to take on your case for a reduced fee. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal consultations, paperwork, and sleepless nights. True to her word, Grandma covered the legal fees and introduced me to her friend's son, a sharp young lawyer named Michael. It's an open and shut case, Michael assured me after our first meeting. We have the bank records, the text messages. Your mother doesn't have a leg to stand on. The day of the trial arrived. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw my mother for the first time in months. She sat on the other side, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't even look at me. The proceedings seemed to pass in a blur. Michael presented our case clearly and concisely, showing the judge the evidence of my mother's deception. When it was her turn to speak, my mother spun a tale of a desperate need for a family medical emergency, but her story quickly fell apart under questioning. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge made his ruling. In the matter of Kimberly Johnson versus Linda Johnson, he began, I find in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to repay the full amount of $15,000, plus interest and court costs. A few days later, I received notice that my mother had taken out a loan to repay me. The money was back in my account, but it felt hollow somehow. I'd won the case, but I'd lost my family in the process. The dust had barely settled from the court case when the real storm hit. It started with a notification on my phone. A friend had tagged me in a post. Curious, I opened it, only to feel my stomach drop. There, on my mother's social media page, was a long, heart-wrenching post about how her own daughter had cruelly taken her to court. She painted herself as a loving, sacrificial mother who had given everything for her children, only to be betrayed in her time of need. My phone buzzed constantly over the next few days as more relatives reached out, not to hear my side, but to berate me for my actions. "I raised you better than this," my aunt scolded. "You brought shame to this entire family," a cousin messaged. "Don't bother coming to the next family reunion," an uncle warned. In the midst of this storm, there was one unwavering source of support: Grandma. She called me every day, her voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. "Don't you pay any mind to those fools," she'd say firmly. "They don't know the half of what's been going on in that house all these years." A week after my mother's posts went viral, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years, my father's. "I've been seeing your mother's posts," he began, and I braced myself for the criticism. But then he surprised me. "I want to hear your side of the story. The full story." So I told him everything. The years of feeling overlooked, the incident with my piggy bank, the struggles through college, and finally, the loan and the betrayal that led to the lawsuit. There was a long silence when I finished. Then, to my shock, my father's voice came back thick with emotion. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "Kimberly, I'm so sorry. I failed you as a father. I followed your mother's lead for too long. I told myself I was providing for the family by working long hours, but the truth is, I was running away from the problems at home. I should have been there for you." Tears were streaming down my face now. This was the most open, honest conversation I'd had with my father in, well, ever. "I've got a lot to make up for," he said. "I know that. But if you're willing, I'd like to try. To be the father I should have been all along." As we continued to talk, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a parent in my corner. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but it was a start. After our heart-to-heart, Dad decided to take a closer look at the family finances, something he admitted he should have done years ago. He had found that Mom had been secretly withdrawing money from their joint account for years, funneling it all into Tommy's career. But that wasn't the worst of it. She'd taken out multiple loans in both their names, all to fund Tommy's pursuits. They were drowning in debt, and Dad had been completely in the dark. The confrontation that followed was explosive. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from the neighbors. There was shouting, the sound of dishes shattering, and finally, the arrival of police cars. In the aftermath, Dad filed for divorce. The proceedings were messy, but in the end, Mom got half of everything, which went straight to paying off her mountain of debt. I maintained my distance from Mom, focusing on rebuilding my relationship with Dad and cherishing the unwavering support of Grandma. Life started to feel normal. Then, about a year after the divorce, Mom's triumphant posts started appearing on social media again. Tommy had graduated from his music college and landed a spot in a famous band. Her captions were full of "I told you so's" and thinly veiled jabs at Dad and me. "Some people couldn't see the potential," she wrote. "But a mother always knows." Who's laughing now? I tried not to let it get to me. I was doing well at work, had just made a down payment on my own apartment, and was finally feeling like I was on solid ground. Dad was doing better too, seeming happier and more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. 2 years after Tommy's big break, he took another trip to Switzerland. His social media was full of glamorous shots of the Alps, videos of him partying with his bandmates. Then, one chilly morning, he decided to film himself singing at the top of a mountain, wanting to impress his fans with his vocal range in the thin, cold air. It was a disaster. He caught a severe cold that developed into a serious throat infection. Despite the best medical care, the damage was done. Tommy lost his singing voice. The news hit Mom hard. Her neighbors later told me that they heard screaming coming from her house, sounds of things being thrown and broken. When they went to check on her, they found her in a state of total hysteria. She didn't recognize anyone, kept babbling about lost fortunes and ruined dreams. They had no choice but to call for help. Mom was admitted to a mental health facility. The doctors diagnosed her with a severe nervous breakdown, exacerbated by years of stress. As for Tommy, he spiraled into depression and turned to alcohol. For months, we weren't sure if he'd pull through. But slowly, with support from Dad and me, he started to turn things around. He got sober and, in a twist that surprised us all, applied to college to become a music teacher. "I can't sing anymore," he told me over coffee one day. "But maybe I can help other kids who love music. Do it right, you know?" Without all the pressure and crazy expectations. I felt a surge of pride for my little brother. "I think that's a great idea, Tommy." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the tumultuous journey of the past few years. I thought about Mom, still in the facility, trapped in a world of her own making. About Dad, finally free to live his own life. About Tommy, finding a new path. And about myself. I'd stood my ground, fought for what was right, and come out stronger on the other side. I'm Victoria, and I guess you could say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Not that we were filthy rich or anything, but my childhood was pretty damn good. Mom and Dad? They were like something out of a rom-com, always holding hands, stealing kisses when they thought I wasn't looking. We lived in this cozy little house in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Every weekend was like a mini adventure. Dad would pack us all into our beat-up station wagon, and off we'd go. Sometimes it was a hike in the nearby state park, other times a trip to the local cinema to catch the latest blockbuster. School was, well, school. I wasn't the popular kid, but I wasn't the outcast either. Just your average student trying to navigate the minefield of adolescence. I had a small group of friends, real friends, not those fake ones who only hang around when it's convenient. High school flew by in a blur of exams, awkward school dances, and late-night study sessions fueled by too much caffeine and junk food. Before I knew it, graduation was looming on the horizon. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with Mom and Dad, a stack of college brochures spread out in front of us. "So, Vicky," Dad said, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, "any idea what you want to do with your life?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and looking forward to. "I want to be a cardiologist," I blurted out. Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks that parents seem to perfect, a whole conversation without a single word. "All right," Dad finally said. "If this is what you really want, we'll make it happen." Getting into med school was just the beginning. The next 4 years were even more intense than undergrad. There were times I thought my brain might explode from all the information I was trying to cram into it. But there were amazing moments too. The first time I successfully drew blood from a patient, after a few embarrassing misses. The day I correctly diagnosed a heart murmur during rounds. The moment I realized that all this hard work was actually turning me into a doctor. Graduation day was surreal. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I saw my parents in the audience. Mom was crying, of course, and even Dad looked misty-eyed. As we left the auditorium, Dad threw his arm around my shoulders. "So, Dr. Adams," he said with a grin, "what's next?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the future on my shoulders. "Now," I said, "I become a cardiologist." Little did I know, my journey was far from over. In fact, the real challenges were just beginning. Fresh out of med school, I dove headfirst into my career at a private clinic in the city. The hours were long and grueling, but I loved every minute of it. I was finally doing what I'd dreamed of for so long, helping people, saving lives. As the months flew by, my hard work started to pay off. My bank account grew, and for the first time in my life, I had more money than I knew what to do with. On a whim, I walked into a car dealership one day and drove out in a sleek new sedan. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, bought with my own hard-earned money. A few months later, I signed the mortgage papers on a spacious apartment in a nice part of town. As I stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I was living the dream I'd worked so hard for. With the holidays approaching, I decided to take a few days off to visit my parents. I hadn't seen them in months, and I was excited to share my success with them. But as soon as I walked through the door of my childhood home, I knew something was off. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mom and Dad were in the same room, but they might as well have been on different planets. The warm, loving atmosphere I remembered was gone, replaced by a cold, uncomfortable silence. At dinner, the tension was palpable. Mom and Dad barely looked at each other, let alone spoke. I tried to fill the silence with stories about work, but my words fell flat in the frosty air between them. Later that night, I cornered Mom in the kitchen while she was doing the dishes. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "You and Dad, you're acting like strangers." Mom's hand stilled in the soapy water. She didn't turn around, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "It's nothing, honey," she said, her voice tight. "People change, that's all. Your father and I, we're just different people now." But I knew my mother. I could hear the pain behind her words. "Mom, please, tell me the truth." She sighed, finally turning to face me. The sadness in her eyes broke my heart. "Your father, he got a promotion at work a few months ago. With it came a personal assistant, a young woman." My stomach dropped. "Mom, are you saying?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "He's been staying late at the office, more and more. I think she might be his mistress." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My dad, the man I'd idolized my whole life, cheating on my mom? It didn't seem possible. "I'm going to talk to him," I said, anger rising in my chest. "How dare he do this to you?" "No, Victoria," Mom said, grabbing my arm. "I've already decided. I'm going to file for divorce. I've talked to a lawyer, everything's planned out." I stared at her in shock. "Divorce? But can't you work it out?" She smiled sadly. "Some things can't be fixed, sweetheart. And I don't want you to get caught in the middle of this. I have no hard feelings towards your father, and I don't want you to either. These things, they happen in life. We need to be understanding." I couldn't believe how calm she was being about all this. If it were me, I'd be furious, devastated. But here was my mom, handling it all with grace and dignity. The divorce hit like a hurricane, leaving destruction in its wake. Mom, bless her heart, didn't go down without a fight. She demanded half of everything and extra compensation for Dad's infidelity. To his credit, Dad didn't argue. He paid up without a fuss. But the real kicker? Before the ink was dry on the divorce papers, Dad married his assistant. His mistress. My new stepmother. I nearly choked when I saw her. She couldn't have been more than a few years older than me. 22 years younger than Dad, for crying out loud. She was closer to being my friend than my stepmother. Not that I wanted anything to do with her. I kept my distance, limiting my interactions with Dad and his child bride to bare necessities. It hurt to see him with her, to see how quickly he'd moved on while Mom was still picking up the pieces. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw me another curveball. I got an offer to work at a prestigious clinic in another city. 2 years, great pay, and a chance to study under Dr. Harriet Chen, one of the most renowned cardiologists in the country. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. I called Mom as soon as I got the news. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she exclaimed, genuine joy in her voice. "You have to take it. This could be huge for your career." Her enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time in months, I felt excitement bubbling up inside me. This was my chance for a fresh start, away from all the drama. Word of my impending move must have spread because Dad called me the next day. "Vicky," he said, his voice hesitant, "I heard you're moving." "Yeah, Dad. Got a great job offer in." He cut me off. "Listen, I need to ask you something. It's a bit awkward. Things at work, they're not great. My income's taken a hit. I was wondering, could Sarah and I use your apartment while you're gone? And maybe, borrow your car?" I was speechless. After everything that had happened, he had the nerve to ask this? I don't know, Dad. I need to think about it. I hung up, my mind whirling. Part of me wanted to tell him to get lost. But another part, he was still my dad. I called Mom, dreading her reaction. To my surprise, she was calm. It's your apartment, your car, Victoria, she said. You're an adult. You get to decide what to do with your things. I won't be offended, whatever you choose. Her maturity made me feel small and petty. After a sleepless night, I called Dad and agreed. The day I handed over the keys was surreal. Dad looked sheepish, but Sarah, she had this smug look that made my skin crawl. As I handed Dad the keys, Sarah piped up. Well, isn't this nice? The keys finally returning to their rightful owner. She nodded at Dad with a simpering smile. I stared at her, then at Dad, confusion and anger bubbling up inside me. Dad quickly pulled me aside. Vicky, honey, he whispered, I need you to play along. I may have told Sarah that the apartment and car are mine. That I've just been letting you use them. I gaped at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. This man, who I'd admired my whole life, was asking me to lie. To pretend I hadn't worked my ass off for everything I owned. In that moment, something inside me broke. The last shred of respect I had for my father vanished. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my dad's face, and made a decision. Without a word, I turned and walked out of my own apartment. 2 days later, I was on a plane to my new life in a new city. As the plane took off, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For 2 years, I wouldn't have to deal with any of this drama. I could focus on my work, on becoming the best doctor I could be. The 2 years in the new city flew by like a dream. I kept in touch with Mom regularly, our weekly Skype calls a lifeline to home. She looked better each time, the sparkle returning to her eyes as she built her new life. Dad, on the other hand, was a different story. Our calls were audio only. He claimed he couldn't figure out all this newfangled video stuff. I didn't push it. Hearing his voice was hard enough. I wasn't sure I could handle seeing him with his new wife. When my contract ended, I returned to my old city with mixed feelings. I was excited to start back at my old clinic, but dreading the family drama I'd left behind. The day I went to reclaim my apartment, I stood outside the familiar door, key in hand, heart pounding. But when I tried to unlock it, the key wouldn't turn. Frowning, I knocked loudly. The door swung open, revealing Sarah's annoyed face. Oh, she said flatly. It's you. I pushed past her into the apartment and froze, my jaw dropping. The place was unrecognizable. Gone were my tasteful, muted colors, replaced by garish bright hues that hurt my eyes. My carefully chosen furniture had vanished, switched out for modern pieces that clashed horribly with the overall design. But the real shock came when I stepped into what used to be my bedroom. It had been transformed into a nursery, complete with a crib and changing table. What the hell is this? I demanded, whirling to face Sarah. She smirked, resting a hand on her very pregnant belly. We needed to make some changes. This is our home, after all. Your home? I sputtered. This is my apartment. Sarah's eyes narrowed. No, this is your father's apartment. He's just been letting you stay here out of the kindness of his heart. And now, as his wife, I'm the lady of the house. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell her the truth, but something made me hesitate. The sight of her swollen belly cooled my anger. I couldn't bring myself to stress out a pregnant woman, no matter how infuriating she was. I spent the next few hours seething, pacing the garishly redecorated living room. When Dad finally walked through the door, I pounced. Dad, we need to talk. Now. He nodded, looking tired. I know, Vicky, let's step outside. Once we were alone, I let loose. What the hell, Dad? You let her completely trash my apartment? And what's this bullshit about it being your place? He held up his hands placatingly. I know. It's complicated, sweetie. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Things at work, they're not good. If Sarah knew we were living off your charity. Please, Vicky, don't kick us out. Not with the baby coming. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream and rage and throw them both out on their ears. But looking at my father, this broken, pleading version of the strong man I once knew, I couldn't do it. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. We'll figure something out. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, sweetheart. Oh, and there's one more thing. I braced myself. What? I may have given Sarah your car. When I found out about the baby, I wanted to do something nice for her. I'll pay you back, I promise. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. It's fine, Dad. The clinic's not far, I can walk. He kissed my hand, his eyes brimming with gratitude. You're an angel, Vicky. We'll make this work, you'll see. As I watched him go back inside, I tried to convince myself this could work. I'd be at the clinic most of the time anyway. Maybe I could even learn to get along with Sarah. I threw myself into work with renewed vigor. The clinic became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the tension at home. I'd leave before dawn and return long after dark, tiptoeing through the apartment to avoid waking Sarah or the newborn baby. 2 months into this routine, fate threw me a lifeline. I was grabbing a quick coffee at my favorite cafe when I quite literally bumped into him. Tall, with kind eyes and a crooked smile, Jake was charming from the moment he helped me mop up my spilled latte. I'm so sorry, he said, handing me a wad of napkins. Can I buy you a replacement? One coffee turned into dinner, which turned into more dates. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other regularly. For the first time in months, I felt light, happy. Jake was funny, smart, and best of all, completely removed from my family drama. I started spending more and more time at his place, relishing the peace and normalcy. It was a blissful respite from the chaos at home. But reality has a way of intruding. One evening, I arrived home to find Sarah waiting for me, her face like thunder. Where have you been? She demanded, bouncing a fussy baby on her hip. I blinked, taken aback by her tone. At work, then out. Why? She thrust a mop at me. This place is a mess. Your father can't afford a housekeeper, so you need to pull your weight around here. I'm busy with the baby. Anger flared in my chest. I'm not your maid, Sarah. I work 60-hour weeks saving lives. I'm not spending my free time cleaning up after you. Her face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little freeloader. Living off your father's generosity and you can't even help out? Maybe we should kick you out, see how you like that. I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sheer audacity of her threat was almost impressive. Good luck with that, I said, turning away. For the next few days, I ignored Sarah's pointed looks and passive-aggressive comments about the state of the apartment. I focused on work and on Jake, counting the hours until I could escape to his place. Then, one afternoon, my world imploded. My phone rang, it was Jake. Hey, you, I answered, smiling. I was just thinking about you. It's over, he cut me off, his voice cold. I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. What? Jake, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Victoria. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I can't believe I fell for your act. Jake, I honestly have no idea. Save it, he snapped. We're done. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, stunned. What the hell had just happened? Seconds later, a message popped up. It was from Jake, a photo. My heart stopped as I opened it. It was me, locked in a passionate kiss with a man who definitely wasn't Jake. Except, it wasn't me. The woman in the photo looked like me, but something was off. The hair wasn't quite right, the posture, not quite mine. Realization dawned, along with a wave of fury. Sarah. This had Sarah written all over it. I tried calling Jake back, desperate to explain, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages bounced back, undelivered. He'd blocked me. I stormed into the apartment, fury radiating from every pore. Sarah sat on the couch, a smug smile playing on her lips. She knew exactly what she'd done. "You," I snarled, advancing on her. "What the hell have you done?" Sarah's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "It was easy, really. A little Photoshop here, a few messages there. You'd be surprised what people will believe when they're jealous." The casual way she admitted to destroying my relationship made my blood boil. "You fabricated that photo? And what messages?" "Oh, just a few posts on social media about how you're dating multiple men, looking for someone richer than your boyfriend. You know, the usual gold digger stuff." I was speechless with rage. How could someone be so callous, so cruel? Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Now listen here, princess. You're going to start pulling your weight around here. Clean the house, do the laundry, take care of the baby when I need a break. Or else." "Or else what?" I spat. "Or else I'll make sure your daddy knows what an ungrateful brat you are. He'll kick you out so fast your head will spin." That was it. The final straw. I threw my head back and laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You really don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "This is MY apartment. I bought it with MY money. You're the ones who'll be out on the street if you don't apologize and help me fix things with Jake." Sarah's face contorted with rage. She opened her mouth to retort, but just then, the front door opened. Dad walked in, looking tired and confused at the tableau before him. Sarah immediately launched into a tirade. "John, you won't believe what your daughter just said. She's threatening to kick us out. After everything we've done for her. She's an ungrateful, selfish bitch and I want her gone." Dad's eyes met mine, pleading. He leaned in close, whispering, "Vicky, please. Just go along with it. Move out for a while. We'll sort this out later." I stared at him in disbelief. My own father, asking me to leave my own home. Something snapped inside me. "No," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I'm done playing along. This is my apartment. You two have until tonight to get out, or I'm calling the police and having you removed." Dad's face darkened. "After everything I've done for you? I paid for your education. Your fancy medical degree. And I've more than repaid that by letting you live here rent-free and use my car," I shot back. "We're even. Now get out." Sarah was screaming obscenities, Dad was trying to reason with me, but I stood firm. I watched in stony silence as they packed their things, Sarah alternating between cursing me and sobbing dramatically. As they walked out the door, Dad turned to me one last time. "You'll regret this, Victoria. Mark my words." The silence in my newly reclaimed apartment was deafening. As I sat there, surrounded by the garish remnants of Sarah's decorating spree, I felt a sudden surge of determination. No more sacrifices. No more adjusting my life to accommodate others' lies and manipulations. It was time to take control. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew I could always count on, my mom. "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "I need to talk to you." I poured out everything, the lies, the manipulation, the final confrontation. Mom listened patiently, her calm presence a balm to my frayed nerves. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. You did the right thing." Her words were like a warm embrace. "Thanks, Mom, but I've lost Jake. Sarah ruined everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Maybe not. Give me Jake's number." "Mom, what are you?" "Trust me, sweetheart. I've got this." Bewildered but hopeful, I gave her the number. The next day, I received a text from Mom asking me to meet her at our favorite cafe. When I arrived, my heart nearly stopped. There, sitting across from my mother, was Jake. Mom waved me over, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Sit down, Victoria. Jake and I were just having a lovely chat." Over the next hour, Mom laid out the whole sordid tale, Sarah's lies, Dad's deceptions, all of it. Jake listened, his face a mix of shock, anger, and shame. When Mom finished, Jake turned to me, his eyes brimming with remorse. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you, should have given you a chance to explain." I wanted to forgive him, but the hurt was still raw. "You believed the worst of me so easily, Jake. How can I trust you won't do it again?" To my utter shock, Jake slid out of his chair and dropped to one knee in the middle of the busy cafe. "Victoria Adams, I love you. I was an idiot, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. Please, forgive me?" The cafe had gone silent, all eyes on us. I felt a blush creeping up my neck, but looking into Jake's earnest eyes, I found my anger melting away. "Oh, get up, you big idiot," I said, tugging him to his feet. "Of course I forgive you." The cafe erupted in applause as Jake swept me into a kiss. Mom wiped away a tear, beaming at us both. Life has a funny way of working out. A couple of months later, we heard through the grapevine that Sarah had run off with a younger man, leaving Dad and the baby behind. She'd finally realized that Dad had no money or property to his name. Dad, in his desperation, tried to reconcile with Mom, but she refused him. 3 years passed in a whirlwind of love, laughter, and career success. When Jake proposed, properly this time on a moonlit beach, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our wedding day was perfect. Mom walked me down the aisle, radiant with joy. As I exchanged vows with Jake, I caught sight of an empty seat in the back, the one reserved for Dad. He hadn't come. A pang of sadness hit me, but as I looked back at Jake, at Mom, at all the people who truly loved and supported me, I realized I had everything I needed. I never asked to be born. Hell, my parents never asked for me either. The way my mom tells it, she was young and stupid, head over heels for some guy who couldn't keep it in his pants. Next thing you know, boom, baby on the way. That baby was me, Sheila, the mistake. Mom wanted to get rid of me, but both sets of grandparents found out and shut that down real quick. Back then, you didn't raise kids alone. So Mom and Dad got hitched, and I came along kicking and screaming 9 months later. Dad never let me forget how I'd ruined his life. "There goes my youth," he'd mutter every time he looked at me. To him, I wasn't a daughter, I was a ball and chain, dragging him down from the life he thought he deserved. For 10 years, it was just the three of us in that little house. Me, tiptoeing around, trying not to piss off Dad. Mom, cooking and cleaning like her life depended on it. And Dad, coming home from work with a scowl that only deepened when he saw me. Then came the miracle, my little sister. Sarah, the golden child. The one they actually wanted. And me? I was shoved even further into the background. "Sheila, watch your sister. Sheila, be quiet. Sarah's sleeping. Sheila, why can't you be more like Sarah?" It was Sarah this, Sarah that. She got new clothes, I got hand-me-downs. She got praise, I got scolded. She got love, I got used to disappointment. By the time I was 10, I was doing most of the housework. Scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, dusting shelves, you name it, I did it. Not that I got any thanks for it. It was just expected. But there was one chore I didn't mind, cooking. Something about mixing ingredients, creating flavors, it felt like magic. I remember the first time I made my special lasagna for a family gathering. Aunt Linda took a bite and her eyes lit up. "Mary, this is incredible. When did you become such a master chef?" Mom just smiled and nodded, soaking up the praise. I stood in the corner, invisible as always. "Actually, I made it," I said, trying to make my voice heard. Aunt Linda laughed, like I'd just told a joke. "Sheila likes to help in the kitchen sometimes," Mom cut in smoothly, still basking in the compliments. "Isn't that right, dear?" I shut my mouth, knowing it was pointless. No one ever believed me anyway. Growing up, the kitchen became my sanctuary. While Sarah got showered with attention and gifts, I found solace in pots and pans. By the time I hit high school, I could whip up a mean pot roast that even Dad couldn't complain about. "Not bad," he'd grunt, shoveling food into his mouth. Coming from him, that was high praise. But it wasn't just about feeding my family. I had bigger dreams. Every night, I'd close my eyes and picture it, my own restaurant, bustling with happy customers, all of them savoring my creations. One night at dinner, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I want to open a restaurant someday," I blurted out. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Sarah snickered. "You? A restaurant?" Mom looked concerned, like I'd just announced I wanted to be an astronaut. Dad didn't even look up from his plate. "Restaurants fail all the time. You'd be broke in a month." "But I'm good at cooking," I protested. "Everyone likes my food." "Everyone likes free food," Dad scoffed. "Doesn't mean they'd pay for it." Sarah piped up, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Maybe you could work at McDonald's, Sheila. I hear they're always hiring." When it came time for college, I set my sights on the best culinary school I could find. To my shock, Dad agreed to pay for it. "This is your inheritance," he said gruffly. "Don't expect anything else. The house, the savings, that's all going to Sarah." I should have been hurt, but honestly, I was too excited about culinary school to care. This was my chance to prove myself, to learn from real chefs and hone my skills. College was a whirlwind of chopping, sautéing, and baking. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My classmates actually appreciated my cooking, and my instructors praised my creativity. But reality came crashing back when I graduated. With no money for my own place, I had to move back home. The contrast between my college life and my family's indifference was stark. "So, you're a chef now?" Sarah smirked over dinner. "Does that mean you'll be doing all the cooking from now on?" Mom jumped in before I could respond. "That's a wonderful idea. Sheila can cook, and you can focus on your studies, dear." And just like that, I was back to being the family maid. But this time, with a culinary degree gathering dust on my shelf. I managed to land a job as an assistant chef at a local restaurant. The pay was lousy, but it was a foot in the door. Every night, I'd come home exhausted, only to face a mountain of dishes and laundry. "This is your rent," Mom would say, handing me a list of chores. "You're not a child anymore. You need to contribute." But I didn't let it break me. Every spare moment, I was planning, dreaming, scheming. I knew that someday, somehow, I'd have my own restaurant. And when that day came, I'd show them all what Sheila was really capable of. 2 years crawled by, each day a carbon copy of the last. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked my ass off at the restaurant, and I watched as Sarah continued to be showered with everything I'd ever wanted. The day Sarah started high school, Dad came home with a shit-eating grin on his face. "Sarah, honey," he called out. "Come see what I got you." We all trooped outside. There, sitting in our driveway like some kind of shiny insult, was a brand new car. A fucking car. "But, I can't even drive yet," Sarah said, her eyes wide. Dad laughed, tossing her the keys. "You will soon enough. My girl deserves the best, right from the start." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. When I turned 16, I got a second-hand bike. And even that was only because I needed it to get to my part-time job. It didn't stop there. Every week, there was something new for precious Sarah. The latest iPhone, a MacBook Pro, designer clothes. They even renovated her bedroom, turning it into something that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Meanwhile, I was still in my old room. The same faded wallpaper, the same creaky bed I'd had since I was 10. But hey, at least the spiders kept me company, right? I started thinking about moving out. Maybe I could find a roommate, split the rent on some tiny apartment. Anything would be better than this constant reminder of how little I mattered. But then came Christmas. I'd been saving up, determined to get everyone nice gifts for once. Show them I wasn't the failure they thought I was. I ended up buying lottery tickets for everyone, not the cheap scratch-offs, but tickets for the big jackpot. Christmas morning came, and I handed out the envelopes, trying not to look too eager. Mom opened hers first. Her face fell. "Oh, lottery tickets." Dad snorted. "What is this, a gas station gift?" Sarah didn't even bother opening hers. She just rolled her eyes. "Gee, thanks Sheila, real thoughtful." "Well," Mom said, her voice sickly sweet, "I guess since Sheila didn't really get us anything, she won't be expecting any gifts either." That seems fair, doesn't it? I felt a lump forming in my throat. Without a word, I snatched the lottery tickets from Dad's hand. "You know what? I'll take them. Merry bloody Christmas." I stormed out, ignoring their shocked faces. Screw their family dinner. I texted my coworker, Jen. "Hey, you still at the restaurant? Mind some company?" An hour later, I was sitting at the bar of the closed restaurant, nursing a glass of cheap champagne with Jen. As the night wore on, Jen and I traded stories about horrible families and crushed dreams. It wasn't exactly a Hallmark Christmas, but at least I felt less alone. A few days later, I was at work as usual. During the break, I reached for my phone. There was a missed call from an unknown number. "Probably just another scam," I muttered, tossing the phone aside. But then it rang again. Same number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Hello, is this Sheila Thompson?" a cheery voice asked. "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Linda from the State Lottery Commission. I'm calling to inform you that you're holding a winning ticket." I almost dropped the phone. "What? Are you serious?" "Absolutely. One of your tickets matched all the numbers in Christmas drawing. After taxes, your winnings come to $690,000. The world spun around me. In a daze, I headed home. My mind was racing. This was it. My chance to finally open my own restaurant. To show everyone what I could do. I burst through the front door, unable to contain my excitement. You won't believe what happened. They were all sitting at the kitchen table, looking at me like I'd grown a second head. "I won the lottery," I blurted out. "One of the tickets, the one I was going to give Mom, it won. $690,000 after taxes." For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then Sarah's shrill voice cut through the air. "That money belongs to us," she screeched. "You bought those tickets as gifts for Mom and Dad. Anything that belongs to them belongs to me." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What? No, they gave the tickets back to me. They're mine." Mom and Dad exchanged a look. "Sheila," Dad said slowly, "be reasonable. You live under our roof. You owe us. Now, hand over that ticket. We'll take care of everything." I took a step back, my hand instinctively going to my pocket where the ticket was. "No," I said, surprising even myself with how steady my voice was. "This is my ticket, my win. I'm going to use it to open my own restaurant." Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Now you listen here, young lady." "No, you listen," I shouted, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. "I've spent my whole life being treated like a second-class citizen in this family. Well, not anymore. This is my chance, and I'm taking it." "If that's how you feel," Mom said, her voice ice cold, "then you can get out of this house. Now." I stared at them, these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. In that moment, I saw them clearly for the first time. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm gone." I stormed up to my room, threw some clothes and essentials into a bag, and walked out. They watched me go, probably thinking I'd come crawling back in a day or two. They couldn't have been more wrong. My first stop was the lottery office, to claim my winnings. Then, I headed straight to a real estate agent. "I need an apartment," I told the surprised agent. "Something available immediately." By that evening, I was sitting in my very own place. It wasn't much, a small one-bedroom in a decent part of town, but it was mine. All mine. As I sat on the floor, I hadn't had time to buy furniture yet, eating takeout and scrolling through restaurant equipment catalogs on my phone. I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. First things first, I needed a solid business plan. I spent weeks hunched over my laptop, researching, crunching numbers, and planning every detail. After what felt like a million revisions, I finally had a plan I was proud of. Next step: location. I scoured the city, looking for the perfect spot. Finally, I found it, a small, run-down space that had been empty for years. The landlord practically laughed when I said I wanted to turn it into a restaurant. "Good luck with that, sweetheart," he chuckled, handing me the keys. I spent the next 3 months turning that dump into my dream. I hired contractors, picked out every fixture, and personally scrubbed every inch of the place. It was backbreaking work, but every blister and bruise felt like a badge of honor. Finally, opening day arrived. I stood in the kitchen, my kitchen, surrounded by the staff I'd handpicked and trained myself. The first order came in, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. "Let's do this," I said, tying on my apron. The first few months were a whirlwind. I worked 18-hour days, cooking, managing, and doing whatever needed to be done. Slowly but surely, word started to spread. People loved my food, not just the taste, but the love and creativity I poured into every dish. I introduced a loyalty program for regular customers, giving them special discounts and first dibs on new menu items. It was a hit. Soon, I had a core group of regulars who came in so often, they felt like family. But I didn't stop there. I set up a delivery service, partnering with local couriers to bring my food right to people's homes. It was a gamble. Quality control was a nightmare at first, but it paid off. Social media became my new best friend. I posted daily specials, behind-the-scenes kitchen videos, and engaged with customers online. My follower count grew, and with it, my customer base. 2 years in, I was turning a profit. It wasn't huge, but it was something. I started looking for a second location. Opening the second restaurant was easier in some ways. I knew what I was doing now, but harder in others. Suddenly, I couldn't be everywhere at once. I had to learn to delegate, to trust my staff, to maintain my standards when I wasn't there. But we made it work. And 3 years after that, I opened my third location. Before I knew it, I was the owner of a successful restaurant chain. Me, Sheila Thompson, the girl who was never supposed to amount to anything. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was in over my head. Days when I wanted to throw in the towel and admit defeat. But every time I walked into one of my restaurants, saw the happy customers, smelled the delicious food, I knew it was all worth it. It was just another Tuesday. I was in my office, going over the books for my newest restaurant, when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a number I hadn't seen in years: home. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I answered, my voice cautious. "Sheila?" It was Mom. "Look, I know we've had our differences, but we need your help. It's about Sarah." Of course it was always about Sarah. "What about her?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Dad's voice came on the line. "She's in trouble, Sheila. She lost her job. They're accusing her of theft, and now no one will hire her. We were hoping you might have a position for her at one of your restaurants." I almost laughed. After everything they'd put me through, they had the nerve to ask for a favor? But then I thought about Sarah. Despite everything, she was still my sister. "Let me talk to her," I said. Sarah came on the line, her voice small and scared. "Sheila, I'm sorry for everything. I really need help." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll give you a job. But listen up, there's no special treatment. You screw up, you're out. Got it?" "Yes." Thank you, Sarah gushed. The next morning, Sarah showed up right on time, looking nervous but determined. I put her to work as an administrator, starting her with basic tasks and slowly increasing her responsibilities. To my surprise, she seemed to take it seriously. She was attentive during training, asked good questions, and didn't complain about the work. One night, as we were closing up, Sarah broke down. "I need to tell you the truth," she sobbed. "I didn't steal anything from my last job. My boss, he tried to force himself on me. When I refused, he fired me and spread rumors that I was a thief." I felt a surge of protective anger. "Why didn't you report him? Who would believe me over him?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "I was so scared, Sheila. I didn't know what to do." "I believe you," I said, pulling her into a hug. "And I'm going to help you, okay? We'll figure this out together." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into teaching Sarah everything I knew about running a restaurant. She soaked it all up like a sponge, eager to learn and prove herself. As I watched her confidently handle a rush of customers, I felt a mix of pride and unease. Sarah was proving to be a quick study and a hard worker. But a nagging voice in the back of my head warned me not to let my guard down completely. At first, everything seemed perfect. Sarah threw herself into her work with an enthusiasm I'd never seen from her before. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, taking on extra shifts and volunteering for the toughest tasks. But then, whispers started reaching my ears. At first, I dismissed them as petty workplace gossip. But as the days went by, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Boss, Marco, my head chef, pulled me aside one day. "I think you need to know something. Your sister, she's been saying things, stirring up trouble." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of things?" Marco looked uncomfortable. "She's been telling people that we're underpaid, that you're hoarding all the profits for yourself. She's even suggested we should go on strike." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's ridiculous. You all know how tight our margins are. I've always been transparent about the finances." "We know, boss," Marco assured me. "None of us are buying it. But there's more." He went on to tell me how Sarah had been claiming that the restaurant rightfully belonged to her, that I had somehow cheated her out of her share of the family money. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. After everything we'd been through, after I'd given her a second chance, this is how she repaid me? I confronted Sarah that evening, my hands shaking with anger and disappointment. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Sarah's face was a mask of innocence. "What are you talking about, sis?" I laid out everything I'd heard. To my shock, Sarah just shrugged. "Oh, that," she said casually. "I was just testing the staff's loyalty. You know, making sure they wouldn't turn on you. Looks like they passed with flying colors." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But something in her eyes, a glint of something cold and calculating, made me hesitate. Before I could press her further, we were interrupted by a frantic knock on my office door. It was Jenna, my assistant manager, looking pale and scared. "Sheila, we've got a problem," she said. "There's a big shortage in the cash register. Over $5,000 missing." We spent the next few hours going over the books, checking and rechecking the numbers. There was no mistake. A significant amount of cash had vanished. Only 3 people had access to that register: Jenna, Marco, and Sarah. I'd known Jenna and Marco for years. They'd been with me from the start, through all the ups and downs. I trusted them with my life. As if reading my thoughts, Sarah sidled up to me. "You know," she said in a low voice, "I've noticed Jenna staying late a lot lately. And she did just buy that fancy new car." As I watched her walk away, I knew I had a decision to make. I couldn't ignore this. Too much was at stake: my business, my reputation, the livelihoods of all my loyal employees. Late one night, after everyone had gone home, I installed hidden cameras around the cash registers. It felt wrong, like I was betraying my staff's trust. But I had no choice. For days, I watched hours of mundane footage, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. And then, on the fourth night, I saw it. Sarah, moving quickly and furtively, opened the register. Her hands darted in and out, stuffing wads of cash into her pockets. My heart sank. I didn't confront her, I couldn't. Instead, I called the police. The next day, as Sarah was finishing her shift, 2 officers walked in. The look on her face when she saw them, shock, then anger, told me everything I needed to know. She thrashed around, knocking over tables and sending dishes crashing to the floor. I deserve this money. I should be rich, not you. You stole my life. As the police led her away, I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Just a hollow emptiness where my love for my sister used to be. The next day, my parents stormed into the restaurant. Mom was crying, Dad's face was beet red with anger. "How dare you?" Dad roared. "Your own sister. Drop the charges now." I stood my ground. No, she stole from me. She needs to face the consequences. I pulled out my phone, showing them the footage of Sarah stealing. "Look," I said. "This is what your precious Sarah did. She's a thief." They watched, their faces pale. But instead of understanding, their expressions hardened. "You set her up," Dad accused. "You've always been jealous of her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jealous? Are you kidding me? You gave me scraps and expected me to be grateful. Well, I'm done. Sarah made her choices. Now she has to live with them. They ranted and raved, alternating between threats and pleas. But I stood firm. "Get out," I finally said. "Get out of my restaurant, get out of my life. If you don't leave now, I'm calling the police." They left, but not before Dad spat out. "You'll regret this, Sheila. Mark my words." The trial was a nightmare. Sarah's tearful performance on the stand almost had me doubting myself. But then came the surprise witness, her former boss. He testified about Sarah's behavior at her last job. How she'd aggressively pursued him, threatening to cry sexual harassment when he rejected her advances. How she'd stolen money from the company in retaliation. In the end, the jury found her guilty. As they led her away, she looked at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, only cold hatred. I haven't spoken to my family since that day. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I look around at what I've built, at the life I've made for myself, and I know I did. As I stand in the kitchen of my newest restaurant, watching my staff prepare for the dinner rush, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. This is my family now. This is my home. And nobody, not Sarah, not my parents, not anyone, can take that away from me. My name is Monica, and my story begins in a bustling household where love was abundant, if not always equally distributed. Growing up, our home was a cacophony of laughter, cries, and the constant patter of little feet. I was the second oldest, sandwiched between my brother Jake, who was just a year my senior, and my 2 younger sisters, Emma and Lily, who came into our lives when I was already in my early teens. From an early age, I learned the art of responsibility. While other kids my age were out playing, I was often found in our modest kitchen, helping Mom prepare dinner or in the living room, cradling a fussy Emma or Lily. It wasn't always easy, but it taught me invaluable lessons about compassion and hard work. Our parents, John and Sarah, were hard-working individuals who dreamed of giving us a better life than they had. Dad worked long hours at the local factory, while Mom juggled part-time jobs and household duties. They weren't rich by any means, but they managed to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. However, there was an undercurrent in our family dynamics that I couldn't ignore. Jake, my older brother, seemed to hold a special place in our parents' hearts. "Jake's the oldest," Dad would say, ruffling his hair affectionately. "He's carrying on the family name. That comes with responsibilities and perks. As we grew older, the disparity became more apparent. When it came time for high school graduation, Jake got a car. I got a heartfelt card and a promise that they'd help with college expenses. It wasn't that I was unloved, far from it. But the preference was clear, and it shaped our family dynamics in subtle ways. My sisters, Emma and Lily, looked up to me with adoring eyes. Being significantly younger, they often saw me as a second mother figure. I took this role seriously, determined to be the kind of role model they deserved. As high school drew to a close, I set my sights on college. My parents, true to their word, had set aside money for our education. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a start. I chose to study finance, a practical field that I hoped would lead to a stable career. My chosen field of study, finance, proved to be as demanding as I'd anticipated. Long nights in the library became my new normal, but I tackled each assignment with the same determination I'd applied to helping Mom with household chores. Despite the workload, I made sure to call home regularly. Mom would fill me in on the family gossip, Dad would grunt his hellos, and my sisters would fight over the phone to tell me about their days. Jake's updates were less frequent, usually relayed through Mom. He'd started working at a local company, showing little interest in further education. Our parents, especially Dad, seemed pleased with his progress. "Your brother's really finding his feet in the business world," Dad would say during our infrequent conversations. "He's got a knack for it." I'd murmur my agreement, pushing down the small spark of competitiveness that flared up. This wasn't a race, I reminded myself. We each had our own paths to follow. As the years passed, I threw myself into my studies and part-time jobs, determined to make the most of the opportunity my parents had given me. Their financial support, while not covering everything, was a lifeline I was deeply grateful for. I knew the sacrifices they were making to keep me in school, and I was determined not to let them down. Graduation day arrived before I knew it. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I scanned the crowd for my family. There they were, Mom and Dad beaming with pride, Emma and Lily waving enthusiastically, and even Jake had made it, standing a bit apart with a half-smile on his face. After the ceremony, Mom hugged me tight. "We're so proud of you, honey," she said, her eyes glistening. Dad nodded, patting my shoulder awkwardly but affectionately. "You've done well, Monica. Now it's time to make your mark in the world." As we celebrated over dinner, I shared my plans to stay in the city and start my career. A part of me had considered returning home, but the opportunities here were too good to pass up. My entry-level position at a financial firm demanded long hours. Visits home became less frequent, limited to major holidays and the occasional long weekend. But I never forgot my roots, calling regularly and sending care packages to my sisters. It was during one of my rare visits home, nearly a decade after I'd first left for college, that everything changed. I was sitting in the kitchen with Mom, catching up over coffee, when my phone rang. It was my boss. "Monica, I have some news," he said, his voice unusually serious. "We're opening a new branch in your hometown, and I want you to head it up. It's a big promotion, but it would mean relocating. Are you interested?" "Yes," I heard myself say. "I'm definitely interested." When I got the job offer back in my hometown, my company said they'd pay for an apartment. But Mom and Dad insisted I move back home. "Come on, Monica," Mom pleaded, "it'll be just like old times." I couldn't say no. On my first day back, I walked into our old house. It looked smaller than I remembered. Emma and Lily, now in their late teens, ran to hug me. Jake lived separately and was already engaged. Later that night, after unpacking, I sat with Emma and Lily in our old room. It felt good to be back, listening to their stories and laughing together. "So, tell me about Jake's fiancée," I said. Emma and Lily shared a look. "Her name's Vanessa," Emma said slowly. "She's different." Lily nodded. "Yeah, she's from a rich family. Her dad owns the company Jake works for now." Something in their tone made me curious. "Different how?" They didn't say much more, just shrugged and changed the subject. I decided to drop it for now. The next few weeks were busy. I started my new job, setting up the branch office. It was hard work, but I loved it. In the evenings, I'd help Emma and Lily with homework or chat with Mom while she cooked dinner. One Sunday, we were all sitting around the table when the doorbell rang. Mom jumped up to answer it. "It's Jake and Vanessa," she called out. I stood up, eager to see my brother and meet his fiancée. Jake walked in first, looking sharp in a suit. Behind him was a tall, slim woman with perfect hair and clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Vanessa looked around our house like it was beneath her. "Oh, how quaint," she said, picking up one of Mom's knickknacks. I watched, confused, as Mom and Dad fussed over her. They kept asking if she needed anything, apologizing for the smallest things. Emma and Lily were quiet, eyes down. When Vanessa made a nasty comment about Lily's clothes, I'd had enough. I pulled Emma aside. "What's going on?" I whispered. "Why is everyone letting her act like this?" Emma sighed. "Jake works for her dad now. It's a big deal. Mom and Dad are scared if we upset her, Jake might lose his job." I was shocked. This wasn't the family I knew. We'd never let anyone treat us like this before. Things got worse at dinner. Vanessa started on me, making snide remarks about my job and clothes. I saw red. "Look," I snapped, "I don't know who you think you are, but in this house, we treat each other with respect. If you can't do that, maybe you should leave." The room went silent. Vanessa's face turned ugly. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out. Jake followed, looking torn. As soon as they left, Mom and Dad rounded on me. "Monica, how could you?" Mom cried. "You know how important this is for Jake." Dad looked disappointed. "You need to control your temper. This could ruin everything for your brother." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They kept at it, begging me to apologize, to be the bigger person. Finally, just to shut them up, I agreed to try and make peace with Vanessa. The weeks flew by, and suddenly Jake's wedding was all anyone could talk about. Vanessa took charge, bossing everyone around like she was running a military operation instead of planning a party. She dragged us to endless dress fittings, insisting we buy expensive gowns that matched the venue's aesthetic. When I suggested something more affordable, Vanessa just laughed. "Oh, Monica," she sneered, "we can't have you looking cheap at my wedding, can we?" The bachelorette party was next on her list. Vanessa handed out a minute-by-minute schedule, complete with mandatory activities and outfit changes. It was ridiculous, but Mom kept giving me these pleading looks, so I bit my tongue. Then came the bombshell. Vanessa wanted us to dance at the wedding. Not just a simple waltz, mind you. No, she was planning a full-on performance. "It'll be the highlight of the reception," she gushed. "You'll all look so cute." My stomach dropped. I'd hurt my back years ago in a car accident. Dancing wasn't really my thing anymore. But I figured, how bad could it be? Turns out, pretty bad. I showed up at the dance studio, and the choreographer started talking about splits and lifts and all sorts of crazy moves. Vanessa was there, barking orders like a drill sergeant. "Come on, ladies, put your backs into it." I pulled out my phone, thinking I'd record it to practice later. But as I watched, I realized there was no way I could do this. It was way too much. "Hold on," I said, "this is insane. We're not circus performers, Vanessa. I can't do these moves." Vanessa's face turned ugly. "What do you mean, you can't? Of course you can. Stop being difficult, Monica." I stood my ground. "No, I mean it. I have an old back injury. This kind of dancing isn't possible for me." That's when Vanessa really lost it. She started yelling, throwing around words I won't repeat. Then she hit me with this gem. "Fine. If you won't dance, you owe Jake $3,500 as a wedding gift. It's only fair, since you're ruining my special day." I was speechless. I looked at Emma and Lily, hoping they'd back me up. But they just stared at the floor, Mom's warnings clearly ringing in their ears. That was it. I'd had enough. You know what, Vanessa? Keep your damn dance. I'm out of here. I stormed out of the studio, my hands shaking as I clutched my phone. The video of that disastrous rehearsal was still recording. As I walked home, my mind raced. What was I going to do now? How had things gotten this messed up? I burst through the front door, still fuming from the dance rehearsal fiasco. Mom and Dad were in the living room, and they could tell something was wrong. I spilled everything: the impossible dance routine, Vanessa's outrageous behavior, the $3,500 ultimatum. I expected sympathy, maybe even anger on my behalf. What I got was something else entirely. Dad's face turned red. Monica, how could you? After everything we've talked about. This wedding is so important for Jake's future. You need to apologize to Vanessa right now and agree to do the dance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Apologize? For what? Having a spine injury? Standing up for myself? Stop being so selfish, Dad shouted. This isn't about you. It's about Jake's happiness and success. So my happiness doesn't matter? I shot back. My health? The argument escalated quickly. Voices raised, tears were shed. I stood my ground, refusing to cave to Vanessa's ridiculous demands. That's when Dad dropped the bomb. If you can't support your brother and his fiancée, then maybe you shouldn't be here at all. The room went silent. I packed a bag that night, ignoring Mom's half-hearted attempts to smooth things over. The next day, I moved into the apartment my company had originally offered. It was small and empty, but at least it was mine. The wedding came and went. I didn't attend, couldn't bear the thought of watching my family kowtow to Vanessa's every whim. I spent that day alone in my apartment, alternating between anger and sadness. A few days later, my phone exploded with notifications. Vanessa had made a post on social media, a long, dramatic tale about how I had tried to ruin her perfect day. She painted herself as the victim, me as the jealous, spiteful sister-in-law. The comments were worse. Relatives I hadn't seen in years were suddenly experts on my character, condemning me for my selfish and cruel behavior. Even Emma and Lily liked the post, a betrayal that cut deep. The call started soon after. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all wanting to tell me how disappointed they were, how I should be ashamed of myself. Emma tried to reach out once, sent a text saying she missed me. But when I suggested meeting up, she backpedaled, said Vanessa wouldn't like it. I didn't try again after that. I threw myself into my work, hoping to finish the project quickly and leave this town behind. But things kept getting delayed, problems cropping up that required my personal attention. Each extension felt like a twist of the knife. Months passed, and I settled into a lonely routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I'd almost gotten used to the silence when my phone rang one night. It was Lily. Monica? Her voice was small, trembling. Can we talk? We met at a cafe across town, away from prying eyes. Lily looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess. She burst into tears the moment she saw me. I'm so sorry, Monica, she sobbed. You were right about everything. Slowly, the whole story came out. After the wedding, Vanessa had shown her true colors. She'd been ordering Emma and Lily around like servants, making them clean her house, cook meals, do laundry, all without pay. She says it's our duty as family, Lily said bitterly. And Jake, he just goes along with it. He sees how she treats us, and does nothing. My blood boiled. What about Mom and Dad? Surely they don't approve. Lily's laugh was hollow. They think it's great. Say we're building character and cementing family bonds. It's like they're brainwashed or something. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was worse than I'd imagined. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you before, Lily whispered. I was scared. We all were. But now, I can't take it anymore. Please, Monica. Help us. The next day, I marched over to our parents' house. Mom answered the door, her smile fading when she saw me. Monica? What are you doing here? I pushed past her into the living room. Dad was there, looking up from his newspaper with a frown. We need to talk, I said. About Vanessa. About how she's treating Emma and Lily. Mom's face hardened. I don't know what Lily's been telling you, but... Don't, I cut her off. Don't try to deny it. I know everything. How can you let this happen? They're your daughters. Dad stood up, his voice cold. Now you listen here, Monica. Vanessa is family now. She's given Jake opportunities we could only dream of. If the girls need to pitch in a little, that's a small price to pay. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A little? She's treating them like slaves. And you're okay with this? You're exaggerating, Mom said weakly. The girls are fine. They're just... Just what, Mom? Just being abused by their sister-in-law while their parents look the other way? Dad's face turned red. That's enough. I won't have you coming in here, stirring up trouble. Vanessa is Jake's wife. She's wealthy, connected. She can give this family a future. If you can't accept that, then maybe you're not really part of this family anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at them, these strangers wearing my parents' faces. So that's it? I said quietly. You're choosing money over your own children? Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad just glared. Get out, he said. And don't come back until you're ready to apologize to Vanessa and Jake. I left, my legs shaky, my heart breaking all over again. As I walked away from my childhood home, I realized a hard truth: I couldn't change their minds. They were too far gone, too seduced by the promise of wealth and status. But I couldn't abandon Emma and Lily. Somehow, some way, I had to find a way to help them. To save them from Vanessa, from our parents' willful blindness, and from the fate they seemed determined to accept. That day started like any other. I was preparing for a big meeting, reviewing notes, and straightening my jacket. Then I saw the name on the guest list: Robert Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries. Vanessa's father. My heart raced. He wouldn't know me, I'd missed the wedding, after all. But I knew him, the man whose money had torn my family apart. The meeting began, all handshakes and forced smiles. Robert didn't give me a second glance. We discussed business, crunched numbers, argued points. Then came the coffee break. I found myself next to Robert, both of us refilling our cups. He started chatting, casual small talk that somehow turned to parenting. You know, he said, puffing up with pride, I raised my Vanessa to be humble. Never let her flaunt our wealth. She grew up modest, well-mannered. Even married a regular guy. She respects everyone, treats them like family. Something in me snapped. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and hit play on a video I'd almost forgotten about. There was Vanessa, red-faced and screaming at the dance rehearsal. You stupid scum, she shrieked on screen. Pay $3,500 or get out. I won't have you ruining my wedding. The color drained from Robert's face. He watched, horrified, as his daughter berated me, my sisters, the other bridesmaids. When it ended, silence fell. I had no idea, Robert whispered. She's always so polite around me. I thought. I believed. I steeled myself for anger, for him to storm out. Instead, he looked at me, eyes pleading. Please, he said. Tell me everything. So I did. The cruel comments, the forced labor, the way she'd turned my family against me. With each word, Robert seemed to age years. I'm so sorry, he said when I finished. I've failed as a father. Please, let me try to make this right. Before I could respond, he was on his feet. Come with me, he said. Now. We drove to Jake and Vanessa's house in silence. Robert's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The scene inside was worse than I'd imagined. Emma was there, wearing a maid's uniform, scrubbing floors. Vanessa lounged on the couch, barking orders. Robert exploded. Vanessa, what is the meaning of this? How dare you treat people like this? Your own family. Vanessa's shock turned to anger. She pointed at Emma. I won't apologize to servants. Robert's face turned purple. That's it. You're cut off. No more money, no more house. I'm ashamed to call you my daughter. Jake tried to intervene. Sir, please. The girls don't mind helping out. It's no big deal. Robert rounded on him. And you, letting your wife abuse your sisters? You're fired. Both of you, out of my sight. He turned to me and Emma, his voice softening. I'm so sorry for everything. Please, let me help make this right. As we left, Vanessa's shrieks fading behind us, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also sadness. This was a Pyrrhic victory at best. The fallout from Robert's intervention was swift and merciless. Instead of seeing reason, my parents doubled down on their support for Jake and Vanessa. They were furious with me, blaming me for ruining Jake's cushy life. How could you do this to your own brother? Mom wailed over the phone. He had everything, and now it's all gone because of you. Dad was even worse. You've always been jealous of Jake, he spat. Well, congratulations. You've destroyed this family. Don't bother coming around anymore. You're not welcome here. Their words hurt, but I wasn't surprised. They'd made their choice long ago, and it wasn't me or my sisters they'd chosen. I threw myself into work, finishing up the project that had kept me in my hometown for so long. The day it was complete, I packed up my apartment and left without looking back. I found a new position in another city, desperate for a fresh start. Months passed. I built a new life, made new friends, tried to forget the family that had rejected me. But I couldn't stop worrying about Emma and Lily. I'd send texts, but the responses were always short, evasive. Then, one rainy night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Emma and Lily, soaked to the bone, suitcases in hand. Monica, Emma said, her voice breaking. We need your help. Over cups of hot tea, they told me everything. Jake and Vanessa, broke and jobless, had moved back in with our parents. But instead of humbling them, it had made Vanessa even more tyrannical. She treats the house like her personal kingdom, Lily explained. And us? We're just her servants. Mom and Dad don't do anything, Emma added. They're so afraid of Jake leaving that they let Vanessa do whatever she wants. My heart broke for them. Why didn't you tell me sooner? They exchanged guilty looks. We were ashamed, Lily admitted. And scared. Vanessa threatened to make things even worse if we reached out to you. But we couldn't take it anymore, Emma said. Please, Monica. Can we stay with you? Just until we find jobs and our own place? I didn't hesitate. Of course you can. Stay as long as you need. It wasn't easy at first. My apartment was small, and we were all adjusting to living together as adults. But slowly, we found our rhythm. I helped them polish their resumes, practiced interview techniques with them. We stayed up late, talking through years of pain and misunderstandings. Weeks turned into months. Emma found a job at a local bookstore, while Lily started taking classes at a nearby community college. They insisted on contributing to rent and groceries, even though I told them it wasn't necessary. One night, as we sat around the dinner table, laughing over some silly story, I realized something. Our parents might never come around. Jake and Vanessa might never change. But that was okay. We had each other, and that was enough. As I looked at my sisters, strong, resilient, finally free to be themselves, I knew we'd be all right. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. As a real family should. My name's Sarah, and I've got a story to tell you. I grew up in a military family, just me and my dad. Mom couldn't handle the stress of constant moves and took off after I was born. Dad, bless him, did his best, but he was always away on duty. So, I ended up living with my grandmother for most of my early years. When I was about 3, Dad remarried. A year later, my half-sister, Emily, came along. I didn't see much of them at first, still living with Grandma and all. But things changed when I turned 10. Dad retired from the military, got a fat pension, and bought a house. He came to get me, saying it was time for us to be a proper family. I was excited at first. A new house, a new family, it seemed like a dream come true. But reality hit hard and fast. My stepmom, Linda, was okay, I guess. She tried to make me feel welcome, but it was clear Emily was her priority. And Emily? Well, she was a nightmare from day one. "That's my room," she screamed when Dad showed me to my new bedroom. "I want it. Make her sleep in the attic." Dad tried to calm her down. "Emily, honey, there's plenty of space for both of you. Sarah needs a room too." But Emily wasn't having it. She threw herself on the floor, kicking and screaming. I stood there, suitcase in hand, feeling like an intruder in what was supposed to be my home. That was just the beginning. Emily made it her mission to make my life hell. She'd accidentally spilled juice on my homework, draw in my textbooks, and hide my things. I learned pretty quick that in this house, Emily could do no wrong. No matter what she did, it was always, "Sarah, be the bigger person," or "Sarah, you need to set a good example." So, I stopped complaining. I learned to hide my important stuff and ignore Emily's antics as best I could. But it wasn't just Emily making things tough. When I was 12, the doctor dropped a bombshell on us. I had problems with my thyroid, hyperfunction, he called it. He said I'd live a normal life, but having kids would probably be off the table. I remember sitting in that sterile office, the words washing over me like ice water. Dad squeezed my hand, trying to comfort me, but I felt numb. At 12, having kids wasn't exactly on my radar, but knowing it might never happen? That hit hard. Emily, being the brat she was, overheard and started calling me empty nut. It stung, but I tried not to let it show. I buried myself in my computer games, finding solace in virtual worlds where I could be anyone, do anything. Life trudged on, and before I knew it, I was 16. That's when everything changed again. Grandma passed away, leaving me her inheritance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make Emily's eyes go wide with envy. "It's not fair," she whined at the dinner table. "Why does Sarah get all the money? We should use it for a family vacation." Dad backed me up, surprisingly. "Emily, that's Sarah's inheritance. She can decide what to do with it." I had plans for that money. All those hours spent gaming hadn't just been an escape, they'd given me an idea. I wanted to open a network of computer clubs for teenagers, maybe even a camp for training esports athletes. A place where kids like me could feel at home, surrounded by people who got it. When I shared my idea, Emily laughed so hard she nearly choked on her peas. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Who'd want to go to a nerd camp?" "It's not dumb," I shot back. "Esports is growing. It could be big. High school graduation couldn't come fast enough. College was a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I could just be Sarah, not the girl with the annoying sister, or the one who couldn't have kids." I threw myself into my studies, focusing on business management. All the while, my dream of the esports camp simmered in the back of my mind. After graduation, I took a leap of faith. I packed my bags and headed to South Korea for an internship. If I was going to learn about esports, why not go to the Mecca? Those 3 years in Korea were intense. I worked my ass off, learning everything I could about running gaming centers and managing teams. I saw firsthand how esports could change lives, giving kids a sense of purpose and belonging. When I finally came back home, I was ready. I used Grandma's money to rent a small space and turned it into my first computer club. It wasn't much, just a dozen computers and some second-hand furniture, but it was mine. The first few months were tough. Some days, I'd sit there alone, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. But slowly, word spread. Kids started trickling in after school, then flooding in on weekends. 5 years flew by in a blur of expansion, tournaments, and sleepless nights. Before I knew it, I had 5 thriving clubs and a full-fledged training camp for aspiring esports athletes. My team was racking up wins left and right. I was so focused on work that dating wasn't even on my radar. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. It was at a gaming convention. I was there scouting new talent when I quite literally ran into him. Coffee went flying, splattering both our shirts. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," I stammered, frantically grabbing napkins. He just laughed, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. "No worries. I needed a wake-up call anyway. I'm Jake." "Sarah," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. We ended up talking for hours, long after our shirts had dried. Jake was a game developer, passionate about creating educational games for kids. He got my vision for the clubs in a way few others had. As we said goodbye, he hesitated. "Listen, Sarah, would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? Preferably without wearing it?" Our coffee date turned into dinner, then weekend trips, and before I knew it, a year had flown by. He was different from anyone I'd ever met, supportive, kind, and he actually listened when I talked about my work. One night, over a homemade dinner, Jake got down on one knee. I was overjoyed, but a nagging voice in the back of my head wouldn't let me fully embrace the moment. "Jake, wait," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to know." I told him about my thyroid condition, about the likelihood that we'd never have children. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. Jake just smiled and took my hands in his. "Sarah, I love you. Kids or no kids, I want to spend my life with you. We'll face whatever comes together." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded, too choked up to speak. He slipped the ring on my finger, and just like that, we were engaged. When we went to tell my family, I was a bundle of nerves. Dad was thrilled, of course. He clapped Jake on the back so hard I thought he might knock him over. "Welcome to the family, son," he boomed. Linda offered a tight smile and a quick hug. "And Emily?" She didn't even bother to come downstairs to meet Jake. I could hear her music blasting from her room, a clear message that she couldn't care less about my engagement. The wedding ceremony was perfect, simple, heartfelt, surrounded by our closest friends and colleagues. As we exchanged vows, I felt like my heart might burst with happiness. At the reception, I scanned the room, a small part of me still hoping to see Emily. Instead, a waiter approached with a large, beautifully wrapped box. "A delivery for the bride," he announced. The sender said to open it in front of everyone. My heart skipped a beat. Could this be Emily's way of making amends? Hopeful, I tore into the wrapping paper. But as I lifted the lid, my blood ran cold. Inside were baby clothes, tiny onesies, booties, and bibs. The room fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, could almost hear the whispers starting. Jake was at my side in an instant, his arm around my waist. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I couldn't speak. Tears stung my eyes as the realization hit me, this wasn't an olive branch. It was a deliberate, cruel reminder of what I couldn't have. Jake took one look in the box and understood. His jaw clenched, but his voice was gentle when he spoke to our guests. "Looks like someone jumped the gun on baby gifts," he said with a forced laugh. "How about we get back to the dancing?" As I danced with Jake, laughed with our friends, a small part of me couldn't help but wonder, would I ever truly be free of my sister's shadow? The years after the wedding flew by in a whirlwind of work and ambition. I threw myself into expanding my business, driven by a mix of passion and, if I'm honest, the need to prove myself. Those computer clubs I dreamed of? They were thriving. But the real jewel in my crown was the esports training camp. I spent more and more time at the camp, coaching and mentoring. It was incredible to watch these kids grow, not just in their gaming skills, but in confidence and teamwork too. But while my professional life was soaring, my personal life was complicated. Every visit to my parents' house felt like walking into a minefield. Emily's hostility hadn't lessened over the years, if anything, it had intensified. She'd make snide comments about how I'd stolen Grandma's money, how I was getting rich off her inheritance. Must be nice, she'd sneer, living it up while the rest of us struggle. I tried to brush it off, but her words stung. Emily, I worked hard for everything I have, I'd say, trying to keep my voice level. Grandma's money just gave me a start. But she'd just roll her eyes and mutter something about how I always got everything handed to me. Dad and Linda would try to intervene, to smooth things over, but it was useless. The rift between us just kept growing. I started avoiding family gatherings when I could. It was easier to make excuses about work than to deal with Emily's constant jabs. Jake was my rock through it all, always ready with a hug and a reminder that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. "You're amazing," he'd tell me, his eyes full of love. "Don't let anyone make you doubt that." But there was one doubt that kept creeping in, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. Kids. We'd been trying for a while now, hoping against hope that the doctors had been wrong. Each month brought a new wave of disappointment. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor one night, staring at yet another negative pregnancy test. Jake found me there, silent tears streaming down my face. "Hey," he said softly, sliding down to sit beside me. "It's okay. We knew this might happen, remember?" I nodded, unable to speak. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself break down. "I just wanted to prove them wrong," I sobbed. "To show that I could have it all, the career, the family." Jake stroked my hair gently. "Sarah, listen to me. You are not defined by whether or not you can have kids. You're changing lives every day with your work. You're building a legacy that goes beyond biology." His words helped, but the ache remained. We talked about other options, adoption, surrogacy, but for now, we decided to focus on our life together and my growing business. 10 years. It hardly seemed possible that a decade had passed since I opened my first computer club. As the anniversary approached, I decided it was time for a celebration, not just of my success, but of all the kids whose lives had been touched by our programs. I spared no expense for the party. The main hall of our flagship camp was transformed into a glittering wonderland of tech-themed decorations. Gaming stations were set up alongside a lavish buffet, blending the world of esports with classic party elements. The guests started arriving, current and former students, parents, industry colleagues, even a few local celebrities who'd taken an interest in our work. I plastered on my best hostess smile, greeting everyone warmly. Then I saw Emily. My heart dropped to my stomach. What was she doing here? I certainly hadn't invited her. She was arm in arm with a guy I didn't recognize, probably her latest boyfriend. To my surprise, she seemed subdued. No snide remarks, no eye rolling. Just a quiet congratulations as she passed by. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this evening without incident. The party was in full swing. Kids were showing their parents their favorite games, business contacts were being made over hors d'oeuvres, and the general buzz of excitement filled the air. I was just starting to relax when I saw Emily making her way to the stage. My blood ran cold. What was she doing? Before I could react, she had grabbed the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone. I have something to say." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Emily. "I know we're here to celebrate my sister's success," she began, her voice sickly sweet. "But I think it's important that you all know the truth." I felt rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak. "Parents, do you really want your children spending time in a place run by someone who can't possibly understand their needs?" Emily's eyes found mine in the crowd, a cruel glint in them. "My sister can't have children of her own. How can a childless woman truly know what's best for your kids?" gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Emily wasn't done. I, on the other hand, am pregnant. She paused, letting that sink in. And I'm opening my own sports camp. One run by someone who actually understands children, who will experience the joys and challenges of parenthood firsthand. I stood there, shell-shocked, as Emily's words hung in the air. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Years of buried pain about my infertility came rushing back, threatening to overwhelm me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Thank God for Jake. He was at my side in an instant, his arm around my waist, steadying me. "Let's get some air," he murmured, but I shook my head. I couldn't let them see me run away. Jake squeezed my hand and turned to address the crowd. "Well, folks, how about we lighten the mood? I hear the chefs have outdone themselves with the dessert spread. Why don't we all head over for a tasting?" As the murmuring crowd moved towards the buffet, I slipped away to a quiet corner. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, seeing notification after notification popping up. Our live stream. I'd completely forgotten about it in the chaos. Comments were flooding in. Some were supportive. "What that woman did was disgusting. Sarah, you're an inspiration. Having kids doesn't make you a good mentor. Sarah's track record speaks for itself." But others were brutal. "How can she run a camp for kids when she can't even have her own? I wouldn't want my child around someone so unnatural." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I pasted on a smile and made small talk when necessary, but inside, I was crumbling. Jake handled most of it, smoothly covering for me when I fell silent or lost track of conversations. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, chaos erupted near the exit. There was a scream, then a thud. I rushed over to see what had happened. My heart stopped. Emily was sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, clutching her stomach, her face contorted in pain. Her boyfriend was kneeling beside her, panic written all over his face. "Someone call an ambulance," he shouted. As he helped Emily to her feet, her eyes locked onto mine. The hatred I saw there chilled me to the bone. "You," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did this. You pushed me." I recoiled, shocked. "What? No, I didn't. I wasn't even near." But Emily wasn't listening. As her boyfriend started to lead her out, she kept screaming. "You're jealous of my baby. You couldn't stand that I can have what you can't." Her words cut deep, reopening wounds I thought had long since healed. I stood there, frozen, as they disappeared through the doors. The remaining guests were staring, some with suspicion, others with pity. I felt exposed, raw, like my deepest insecurities had been laid bare for all to see. The morning after the party, I was nursing a cup of coffee, trying to make sense of the previous night's chaos, when there was a knock at the door. Jake answered it, and I heard low, serious voices. My stomach dropped. "Sarah?" Jake called, his voice tight. "There's a police officer here to see you." I walked to the door on shaky legs. The officer, a stern-faced woman, introduced herself as Detective Martinez. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm here about the incident involving your sister last night," she said. "She's filed a complaint against you. She's lost the baby, and is accusing you of pushing her down the stairs." Jake stepped in, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "We have a full recording of the event. It was being live-streamed." We spent the next few hours going over everything with Detective Martinez. I provided the live-stream footage, the guest list, statements from staff and guests. By the end, I was exhausted but hopeful. Surely, with all this evidence, they'd see I was innocent. A few days later, Detective Martinez called. "Mrs. Thompson, we've concluded our investigation," she said. "You've been cleared of all suspicion." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. "We've identified the actual perpetrator," she continued. "It was your sister's boyfriend, Mark Stevens. We have clear video evidence of him pushing her." I felt sick. But why? He confessed during questioning, Detective Martinez explained. Apparently, he didn't want to marry your sister or have a child with her. He claimed she was forcing him into marriage by threatening to create a scandal. Your sister has been informed of the findings. I thanked her and hung up, feeling numb. It was over. I was cleared. But why didn't I feel relieved? The answer came in the form of a vitriolic voicemail from Emily later that day. This is all your fault, her voice screeched through the speaker. If you hadn't upset me so much at that stupid party, Mark wouldn't have felt pressured to do this. You're the reason I lost my baby. I listened, dumbfounded, as she ranted on, spinning increasingly illogical reasons why I was to blame. According to Emily, I had somehow manipulated Mark into pushing her. I had created such a stressful environment that it drove him to it. On and on she went, each accusation more outlandish than the last. The fallout from Emily's accusations didn't stop with her voicemail. A few days later, I got a call from Dad. His voice was heavy, tired. Sarah, honey, he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but Linda's taken Emily's side in all this. I closed my eyes, feeling a fresh wave of pain wash over me. What do you mean, Dad? He sighed deeply. She says you're not welcome in the house anymore. That you've caused enough trouble. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd never been close to Linda, but to be outright banned from my childhood home? It hurt more than I expected. I'm so sorry, sweet pea, Dad continued, his voice cracking. I want you to know, I don't agree with any of this. I know you're innocent. I've tried talking to them, but it's okay, Dad, I said, even though it wasn't. You don't have to choose sides. But apparently, he already had. Over the next few weeks, I heard from him regularly. He and Linda were fighting constantly. She couldn't understand why he wouldn't condemn me, why he insisted on maintaining a relationship with his troublemaker daughter. It all came to a head about a month after the party incident. Dad called, sounding more resolved than I'd heard him in years. I'm divorcing Linda, he said without preamble. I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I won't choose between my daughters, and I won't live with someone who asks me to. I felt a mix of guilt and relief. Dad, you don't have to do this. I don't want to break up your marriage. You're not, he assured me. This has been coming for a long time. Emily's accusations were just the last straw. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The constant drama, the accusations, the family strife, it all seemed so pointless, so destructive. And for what? I made a decision then. I called Dad back. Dad, I said, my voice steady, I've been thinking. I don't want to have any contact with Emily anymore. Or Linda. I can't keep doing this. There was a long pause. Then, I understand, honey, I really do. You have to take care of yourself. His support gave me the courage to take the next step. The following day, I contacted a lawyer and filed for a restraining order against Emily. It felt extreme, but after everything that had happened, I knew it was necessary. To my relief, the judge granted the order. Emily couldn't come near me, my home, or my businesses. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Afterwards, as Jake and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. I should have done this years ago, I said softly. Set boundaries, I mean. Maybe things wouldn't have gotten so out of hand. Jake squeezed my hand. You can't change the past. But you're taking control of your future, that's what matters. I nodded, leaning into him. You know, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we revisited the idea of adoption. We have so much love to give, Jake. Why not share it with a child who needs it? As we sat there, planning our future, I felt truly hopeful for the first time in ages. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, dealing with my fractured family, starting the adoption process, but I knew with Jake by my side, I could handle anything. Life had thrown me plenty of curveballs, but I was still standing. My business was thriving, I had a loving husband, and now, the possibility of a child to call our own. Emily and her drama no longer had the power to overshadow all the good in my life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I made a silent promise to myself. No more letting others dictate my worth. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. From now on, I would stand tall, proud of who I am and what I've accomplished. After all, family isn't just about blood. It's about love, support, and understanding. And looking at Jake, thinking about our future child, I knew I had all the family I needed right here. My name's Regina, and I became a single mom when my daughter, Mia, was just 10. My ex-husband, Tom, decided he'd found greener pastures with another woman. Just like that, he was gone, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I threw myself into work, determined to give Mia everything she needed. I climbed the corporate ladder, worked overtime, took on extra projects, anything to make sure my little girl wouldn't want for anything. The trauma of abandonment hit Mia hard. She became withdrawn, angry. Her grades started slipping, and she'd lash out at the slightest provocation. I was at my wit's end, trying to be both mom and dad, provider and nurturer. Finally, I decided to take her to a psychologist. Dr. Sarah was kind and patient, but even she struggled with Mia's anger. "Your daughter's dealing with a lot of pain," she told me after one particularly difficult session. "It's going to take time, Regina. Be patient with her." Years passed, and things got better, or so I thought. Mia seemed to be healing, growing into a beautiful, intelligent young woman. But there was an undercurrent of resentment that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't until I started trying to date again that I realized the full extent of the damage Tom had done. Every time I'd meet someone new, someone who might actually be interested in me as more than just Mia's mom, she'd fly off the handle. The first time it happened, I was blindsided. I'd been seeing Mark for a few weeks, and things were going well. He was kind, funny, and he seemed to genuinely care about me. I thought it was time for him to meet Mia. "Honey," I said one morning over breakfast. "I've invited someone over for dinner tonight. His name's Mark, and I want the two most important people in my life to know each other." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Is he your boyfriend or something?" I hesitated, not sure how to answer. "We've been seeing each other, yes. But it's not serious yet. That's why I want you to meet him." "No," she said flatly. "I don't want to meet him. I don't want him in our house. Cancel the dinner." I was shocked. "Mia, sweetie, I know this might be difficult for you, but—" "Difficult?" she shouted, standing up so suddenly, her chair fell backward. "You think this is difficult? You want to abandon me like he did? To start a new family and forget all about me?" She stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I should have known then that this was just the beginning. Despite Mia's outburst, I decided to go ahead with the dinner. I thought maybe if she met Mark, she'd see he wasn't a threat. God, was I wrong? Mark arrived at 7, looking nervous but eager. I introduced him to Mia, who barely looked at him. "Nice to meet you, Mia," he said, extending his hand. "Your mom's told me a lot about you." Mia ignored his hand. "I bet she has," she muttered. The tension was thick as we sat down to eat. I tried to keep the conversation light, but Mia's one-word answers and glares made it difficult. Halfway through the meal, Mark made an innocent comment about how nice it was to have a home-cooked dinner. That's when Mia exploded. "Oh, I'm sure you'd love to have this all the time, wouldn't you?" she sneered. "Playing happy families with my mom?" "Mia," I warned, but she was just getting started. "What, Mom? Isn't that what this is? You trying to replace Dad? Trying to throw me away like he did?" "That's not what this is at all," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm just trying to." "To what? To ruin everything?" Mia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Well, guess what? I won't let you." Before I could react, she grabbed her plate and hurled it to the floor. The crash of breaking china was deafening in the sudden silence. "Mia," I gasped. "What are you doing?" But she wasn't listening. She grabbed another plate, then another, smashing them on the ground. Food and broken dishes were everywhere. "This is our home," she screamed. "Ours, not his." Mark stood up, looking shell-shocked. "I think I should go," he said quietly. After Mark left, Mia locked herself in her room. I spent the night cleaning up the mess, tears mixing with the soapy water as I scrubbed the floor. The next day, Mia acted like nothing had happened. But something had changed. From that day on, any attempt I made to date was met with hostility and tantrums. Years passed, and I found myself pushing away anyone who showed interest in me. It was easier than dealing with Mia's reactions. I told myself it was temporary, that once Mia was older, she'd understand. But deep down, I knew I was just making excuses. When Mia graduated high school, I was so proud. Despite everything, she'd done well in school and gotten into a good college. I thought maybe now, things would change. "Mom," she said the night before she left for college, you won't bring anyone home while I'm gone, will you?" I sighed. "Mia, honey, you're going to be living your own life now. Don't you think it's time for me to do the same?" Her face darkened. "So you are planning to replace me?" "Mia, please," I begged. "That's not fair. I've spent the last 8 years putting you first. I've given up everything for you." As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Mia's eyes filled with tears. "So I'm just a burden to you, is that it?" she cried. "A sacrifice you had to make?" "No, sweetie, that's not what I meant at all." I tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Mia stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, she left for college without saying goodbye. With Mia away at college, I finally had a chance to rediscover myself. I started taking better care of myself, got a new haircut, bought some new clothes, even joined a gym. I reconnected with old friends, started going out more. And then I met David. He was kind, funny, and understood my situation with Mia. We started dating, and for a while, everything was perfect. But Mia, even from college, still tried to control my life. Every call, every visit home, she'd grill me about my social life. "Mom, you haven't let anyone into our house, have you?" she'd demand. I tried to reason with her. "Honey, you're living your own life now. Don't you think it's time I did the same?" But she'd get angry, threaten to drop out of college, say she couldn't focus on her studies, knowing I was replacing her. Once, after finding out about David, she called me in tears. "How could you do this to me? My grades are suffering because I'm so upset about you dating." It was exhausting, constantly walking on eggshells, trying to balance my happiness with Mia's demands. But I kept hoping things would get better once she graduated and started her own life. 4 years passed in this push and pull. Then, out of the blue, Mia called. "Mom, I'm coming home. And I'm bringing someone with me." My heart leapt. Maybe she'd finally found someone and understood why I'd wanted to date. Maybe now, things would change. When they arrived, I was shocked. Mia introduced the man beside her not as her boyfriend, but as her husband. "This is Jake," she said, a challenging look in her eyes. "We got married last week in Vegas." I couldn't believe it. My daughter was married, and I hadn't even known she was dating someone. "Mia," I gasped, "why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited?" She shrugged. "We only met a few days ago. It was spontaneous." They didn't stay long. As they were leaving, I hugged Mia tightly. "I hope you'll be very happy," I whispered, trying to ignore the knot of worry in my stomach. For 6 months, I heard little from Mia. I tried to give them space, hoping they were settling into married life. Then, one rainy night, Mia showed up at my door, mascara streaking down her face. "He cheated on me," she sobbed. "I found him with another woman." We're getting divorced." Mia moved back in, quickly found a job, but showed no signs of looking for her own place. And I, remembering how she'd reacted to my attempts at independence, didn't push her. I was 46, Mia was 24, and we were settled into an uneasy coexistence when the doctor delivered the news that shattered our world. I had intestinal cancer. The diagnosis hit me like a freight train. Cancer. The word alone was terrifying. When I told Mia, she broke down in tears. "Mom," she sobbed, clinging to me, "I'll take care of you. I promise. We'll get through this together." In that moment, all our past conflicts seemed to melt away. I quit my job, thankful for the savings I'd squirreled away over the years. At least we wouldn't have to worry about money on top of everything else. The chemotherapy started, and with it came a host of new challenges. I was constantly exhausted, nauseous, and in pain. Mia took time off work to care for me, and at first, she was attentive and enthusiastic. But as the days wore on, the reality of my condition began to wear on her. The cancer had wreaked havoc on my digestive system. I struggled to use the bathroom, often needing help to clean myself afterward. It was humiliating, but I had no choice. After particularly rough chemo sessions, I'd be too weak to even make it to the toilet. I started noticing changes in Mia's behavior. The loving concern in her eyes was gradually replaced by something else, disgust. She'd wrinkle her nose when she came near me, complaining about the smell. "Mom, you stink," she'd say, not even trying to hide her revulsion. "Can't you do something about it?" I wanted to scream at her, to remind her that I was fighting for my life, that I couldn't control what the cancer and chemo were doing to my body. But I bit my tongue. She was trying, in her own way, and that had to be enough. One day, after a particularly difficult morning, Mia approached me with a determined look on her face. "Mom, I think I need to go back to work," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We should hire a nurse to take care of you." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "I understand. We'll look into getting a nurse." The clinic where I was receiving treatment assigned a nurse named Sarah to help me at home. She was a godsend, strong, capable, and unfailingly kind. She handled my hygiene needs efficiently and without a trace of disgust. "Don't you worry, Regina," she'd say cheerfully as she helped me clean up. "We'll have you feeling fresh as a daisy in no time." With Sarah's help, my quality of life improved dramatically. But Mia wasn't happy about the arrangement. "I don't like having a stranger in our house all the time," she complained. "It's invasive." I tried to explain that Sarah was necessary for my care, but Mia wouldn't listen. Then, one evening, she dropped a bombshell. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Maybe it would be better if you moved to a specialized care facility. I could look after the house, and you'd get round-the-clock care." I stared at her, shocked. "No, I'm not leaving my home. This is where I'm comfortable, and this is where I'm going to fight this cancer." Mia's face clouded over with anger and frustration. "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way." As she stormed off, I felt a deep sadness settle over me. I was fighting for my life, but it felt like I was losing my daughter in the process. As the chemo treatments continued, my body waged war against itself. Each day brought new challenges, new indignities. But nothing prepared me for the day my hair started falling out in clumps. I was in the bathroom, running my fingers through my long, once beautiful hair, when a handful came away in my palm. I stared at it, numb with shock. Mia's shriek jolted me back to reality. "Mom, there's hair everywhere. I'm sick of cleaning it up." I looked at her, standing in the doorway, her face twisted in disgust and frustration. In that moment, I made a decision. "Sarah," I called weakly to my nurse. "Could you please cut my hair?" As Sarah carefully sheared away my locks, I caught sight of Mia in the mirror. Instead of offering support or comfort, she was laughing. "You look like an alien," she snickered. "Maybe you should get a wig." Her words cut deeper than any surgeon's scalpel. That night, after Sarah had gone home and Mia had retreated to her room, I cried silently into my pillow. Where had I gone wrong? How had my sweet little girl turned into this cruel stranger? Weeks passed, and I continued my battle against cancer. Every day was a struggle, but I was determined to fight. Then, one afternoon, Mia dropped another bombshell. "Mom, I'm having some friends over for my birthday next week," she announced casually. I blinked in surprise. "Here? Honey, I don't think that's a good idea." The noise. "I need rest." Mia's face hardened. "If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else for the night." "Actually, that might be better. I won't have to be embarrassed by you in front of my friends or deal with the smell." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been bedridden for days, barely able to move. But in that moment, fury gave me strength. I pushed myself up, fixing her with a glare that would have made my own mother proud. "This is my house," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "If you don't like living here with me, you're welcome to leave." Mia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. "You're so selfish," she screamed. "All you think about is yourself. You know what? It would be better for everyone if you just died already. Then you'd stop being such an inconvenience to everyone around you." The room fell silent. I stared at my daughter, unable to believe the words that had just come out of her mouth. In her eyes, I saw no trace of the little girl I'd raised, no hint of love or compassion. Just cold, hard anger. "Get out," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force in my voice. "Pack your things and get out of my house. Now." For a moment, Mia just stood there, shocked. Then, with a scream of frustration, she stormed off to her room. I could hear her throwing things into bags, slamming drawers. Minutes later, she stormed past me, bags in hand. "I hate you," she spat as she reached the door. "I wish Dad had taken me with him when he left." And then she was gone, the front door slamming behind her. She didn't even bother to close it properly. The open door mocked me, a glaring reminder of Mia's dramatic exit. I sat there, staring at it, feeling utterly drained. Finally, I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed my friend, Linda. "Linda," I croaked when she answered. "I need help. Can you come over?" Linda arrived in record time, concern etched on her face. She closed the door, then rushed to my side. "Regina, what happened?" The whole story poured out of me, Mia's cruelty, her harsh words, her abrupt departure. Linda listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. "Oh, Regina," she sighed when I finished. "You need to forget about that ungrateful girl and focus on yourself. You're fighting cancer, for God's sake." We talked for hours, tears flowing freely between us. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, I came to a painful realization. "It's my fault," I whispered. "I raised her to be this way. I always put her needs first, ignored my own. I thought I was being a good mother, but I was just teaching her to be selfish. From now on, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to think about myself for once." True to my word, I threw myself into my treatment with renewed vigor. Sarah, my nurse, was a godsend, helping me through the worst days with gentle care and unwavering support. 2 more rounds of chemotherapy followed. They were brutal, leaving me weak and nauseous, but I refused to give up. All the while, my phone remained silent. No calls, no texts from Mia. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that I needed to focus on my health, but the silence hurt more than I cared to admit. Months passed. Then, during a routine checkup, my doctor smiled at me, really smiled, for the first time since my diagnosis. "The cancer's receding, Regina," he said. "You're not out of the woods yet, but this is very, very good news." I left the hospital that day feeling lighter than I had in months. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities I'd thought were lost to me forever. I was thin, almost gaunt, after months of illness. My clothes hung off me like sacks. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I started taking short walks in the park near my house, feeling the sun on my face, the breeze and what remained of my hair. One afternoon, I stood in front of my closet, realizing none of my old clothes fit me anymore. Instead of feeling sad, I felt liberated. It was time for a change, inside and out. I spent a day sorting through my wardrobe, making piles to donate to a local homeless shelter. As I packed up bags of my old life, I felt like I was shedding more than just clothes. I was letting go of the old Regina, the one who'd let herself be walked all over, who'd put everyone else's needs before her own. Looking around my big, empty house, I realized it no longer fit the person I'd become. It was time for a change. With my savings providing a comfortable cushion, I made a bold decision: I wouldn't return to work. Instead, I'd downsize and focus on living. I contacted a realtor and put my house on the market. It sold quickly, and I found a small, cozy apartment that felt like it was made for me. It was perfect for one person, bright, manageable, and full of potential for a fresh start. I invested the remaining money from the house sale, feeling financially secure for the first time in years. Life was good, peaceful. I spent my days exploring my new neighborhood, trying new hobbies, and simply enjoying the act of being alive. Then, 3 months after I'd settled into my new life, I received an unexpected call. It was the realtor who'd handled the sale of my old house. "Mrs. Walker," he said, sounding uncomfortable, "the new owners of your old house are having some issues. They've asked for your contact information. Is it all right if I give them your number?" Curious and a little concerned, I agreed. Shortly after, my phone rang again. This time, it was the new owner, a Mr. Thompson. "Mrs. Walker," he began, his voice tense, "I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange happened today. A young woman tried to break into our house. She tried to use a key at first, then started trying to force the door open. When I confronted her, she became hysterical, screaming that this was her house, that she should inherit it after her mother's death." The blood drained from my face. Mia. It had to be Mia. She thought I was dead and had come to claim her inheritance. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice shaking. I think that might have been my daughter. We'd been estranged. She must have assumed." "Your daughter?" He sounded shocked. "But she said you were dead." "I've been very ill, we haven't spoken in months," I explained, not wanting to go into details. "Mr. Thompson, could I ask a favor? If she comes back, would you call me?" He agreed, and we ended the call. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue with my new, peaceful life. But I knew I couldn't. This confrontation had been coming for a long time. It was time to face Mia, to finally say all the things I should have said years ago. The call came sooner than I expected. Just a day after my conversation with Mr. Thompson, my phone rang. "She's here," Mr. Thompson said, his voice tense. "And she's causing quite a scene." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I'm on my way." The drive to my old house felt surreal. As I pulled up, I could hear the shouting before I even got out of the car. Mia's voice, shrill and angry, carried across the yard. "This is my house," she was screaming at the Thompsons, who stood on the porch looking shocked and frightened. "Get out now." I stepped out of my car, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Mia turned, her eyes landing on me. The look of shock on her face quickly morphed into one of fury. "You," she spat. "You're supposed to be dead." I felt a calm settle over me, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around us. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Mia," I said, my voice steady. Mia's face contorted with rage. "What's going on? Why are these people in our house?" "It's not our house anymore, Mia," I explained. "I sold it." Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in anger. "You can't do that. It was supposed to be mine. I was supposed to inherit it when you died." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "I'm sorry I inconvenienced you by surviving." Mia's face turned red. "You don't understand. I have debts, I need money. I shook my head, acutely aware of the Thompsons and the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch the spectacle. I don't owe you anything, Mia. You abandoned me when I was fighting for my life. You wished me dead. Why should I help you now? Because you're my mother, she screamed. You're supposed to take care of me. I felt a sadness wash over me, but I stood my ground. No, Mia, not anymore. You're an adult. Your choices, your consequences. Mia's face twisted into an ugly sneer. You know what? Dad was right to leave you. You're useless. It would have been better if you had died. Her words hung in the air, shocking even the onlookers into silence. But this time, they didn't cut me to the core. This time, I felt only pity for the angry, bitter woman my daughter had become. Without another word, I turned and walked back to my car. Before getting in, I addressed the Thompsons. If she comes back or tries to break in again, call the police, I said, gesturing towards Mia. She has no right to be here. As I drove away, I caught a last glimpse of Mia in my rearview mirror, her face a mask of shock and fury. But for the first time, her anger didn't touch me. I was free. In the months that followed, I embraced my new life fully. I took up painting, finding joy in splashing colors across canvas. My health continued to improve, and each day I felt stronger, more alive. Mia never called or tried to contact me again. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we'd lost, but mostly I felt relief. I had spent so many years trying to fill the bottomless pit of her needs. Now, finally, I was living for myself. I remember my childhood like it was yesterday. The smell of my dad's aftershave, the sound of his keys jingling as he came home from work. I'm Alice, and this is my story. I was born into what you'd call an ordinary family. Mom, Dad, and me. But from the get-go, it was clear who my favorite was. Dad. He was my hero, my everything. Every day, I'd wait by the window, my nose pressed against the glass, waiting for his car to pull up. The moment I saw him, I'd bolt to the door, ready to jump into his arms. There's my little princess, he'd say, scooping me up and spinning me around. I'd giggle, burying my face in his neck, breathing in that familiar scent that meant safety and love. Mom? Well, she was there. Physically, at least. Emotionally? Not so much. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this weird expression, like I was some kind of burden she hadn't signed up for. But Dad made up for it. Every evening, rain or shine, we'd go for walks. He'd point out different trees, teach me about birds, or just let me ramble on about my day at kindergarten. Bedtime was the best. Dad would tuck me in, pull out a book, and transport us both to magical worlds. His voice would change for each character, making me laugh or gasp in all the right places. But when I turned 5, everything changed. I remember the day they sat me down. Mom looked relieved, Dad looked heartbroken. Alice, honey, Dad started, his voice cracking. Mommy and Daddy, we're not going to be living together anymore. I didn't understand at first. Like when you go on business trips? I asked. Mom cut in, her voice flat. No, Alice, we're getting divorced. But don't worry, you'll be staying with your father. It's better this way. I looked at Dad, tears welling up in his eyes. He pulled me close, and I could feel him shaking. He said everything would be okay, but even at 5, I knew, nothing would ever be the same again. The divorce hit me hard, but Dad did his best to make things normal. We moved to a new neighborhood with a good school nearby. I remember the day we arrived at our new house. What do you think, Alice? Dad asked, his eyes hopeful. I looked at the unfamiliar building and felt a lump in my throat. It's big, I managed to say. Dad knelt down beside me. I know it's different, sweetheart. But we'll make it our home together, okay? I nodded, trying to be brave for him. The new school was okay, I guess. I made some friends, but I missed my old life. Dad tried to keep our routines, walks in the evening, bedtime stories, but something had changed. There was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Mom? She became like a ghost in my life. She'd call sometimes, her voice distant and distracted. "How's school, Alice?" she'd ask, but I could tell she didn't really care about the answer. Once in a while, she'd take me for a weekend. It was always awkward, like we were strangers forced to spend time together. I'd come home to Dad, relief washing over me as I stepped through the door. One day, when I was 6, Dad sat me down with a serious look on his face. "Alice, honey, I've got some news," he said, fidgeting with his hands. "I've met someone. Her name is Sarah, and, well, we're getting married. Sarah is nice, I promise. You'll like her." I didn't want to like her. I wanted things to stay as they were, just me and Dad. But life had other plans. Sarah moved in, and suddenly our quiet house was full of noise and change. She tried to be nice, always smiling too brightly, asking too many questions. "Alice, sweetie, what would you like for dinner?" she'd ask, her voice syrupy sweet. "Whatever," I'd mutter, retreating to my room. Then came the biggest change of all. I was in the living room, watching TV, when Dad and Sarah came in, both grinning from ear to ear. "Alice, we have wonderful news," Sarah gushed. "You're going to be a big sister." I looked at Dad, hoping to see some sign that this was a joke. But he was beaming, his hand on Sarah's stomach. "Isn't it great, princess?" he said. "You'll have a little brother or sister to play with." I forced a smile, but inside, I felt like screaming. A baby? How could he do this? Didn't he love me enough? Months passed, and Sarah's belly grew bigger. Dad spent more and more time fussing over her, buying baby things, talking about names. I felt like I was fading into the background. The day the baby was born, I was left with a neighbor. When Dad finally came to get me, he looked exhausted but happy. "Come meet your baby brother, Alice," he said. At the hospital, I peered into the crib at the tiny, red-faced bundle. I looked at the baby, then at Dad, who was gazing at his new son with such love it made my heart hurt. Life changed fast after Tommy was born. Dad was completely wrapped up in his new family, and I felt like I was fading into the background. The walks, the bedtime stories, the special moments, they all disappeared, replaced by diaper changes and late-night feedings. Sarah, my stepmother, barely hid her annoyance with me. I'd catch her giving me these looks, like I was some unwanted houseguest who'd overstayed my welcome. One day, I overheard her talking to Dad in the kitchen. "John, why don't we see if Alice's mother wants her back? It might be better for everyone." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad's voice was sharp when he replied, "Absolutely not. Alice is my daughter, and this is her home. I expect you to treat her like your own." After that, Sarah was careful not to say anything outright mean to me, but the damage was done. I knew where I stood in her eyes, a burden, an obstacle to her perfect little family. As the years went by, I learned to fend for myself. Dad was always busy with Tommy, teaching him to walk, to talk, attending his little league games. I grew up in the shadows, becoming fiercely independent out of necessity. High school graduation came and went. Dad, true to his word, paid for my college tuition. "It's from the money your mom's been sending all these years," he explained. "I've been saving it for your education." I was surprised. I'd assumed Mom had just disappeared from my life completely. But I was grateful for the chance to get away, to start fresh in a new city. College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. I graduated with a degree in financial management, feeling proud and accomplished. But when I returned home, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. The house felt different, smaller somehow. Sarah greeted me with a tight smile. "Oh, Alice, you're back. We weren't expecting you so soon." I lugged my bags upstairs, only to find my childhood bedroom completely transformed. Where my bed used to be, there was now a treadmill. My desk had been replaced by a huge TV and gaming console. The walls, once covered in my posters, were now bare. Tommy needed a rec room, Sarah explained, not even trying to sound apologetic. You can sleep on the couch in the living room. It's just temporary, right? I stood there, staring at the stranger my room had become, feeling more out of place than ever. Right, I mumbled. Temporary. The job search was tough, but I finally landed an entry-level position at a local firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. Every night, I'd scour apartment listings, looking for something, anything, I could afford. Maybe you could find a roommate, Dad suggested one evening, in a rare moment of attention. Split the rent? I nodded, adding another search parameter to my list. But decent, affordable apartments with potential roommates were hard to come by. So, I stayed. Every morning, I'd wake up on that uncomfortable couch, tiptoe around Tommy's toys scattered across the living room floor, and head to work. Every evening, I'd come back to Sarah's cold stares and Dad's distracted nods. Months dragged on, and I was still stuck in limbo, sleeping on the couch and searching for a way out. Tommy had started high school, and suddenly the house was abuzz with excitement, but not for me. John, darling, Sarah cooed one evening, her voice sickly sweet. Don't you think Tommy needs a car? All his friends are driving now. I nearly choked on my dinner. Tommy was barely 15, for crying out loud. Dad, ever the pushover when it came to his precious son, nodded. You're right, honey. We'll go car shopping this weekend. And just like that, Tommy got a shiny new car. Never mind that he couldn't legally drive it yet. I bit my tongue, trying to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. My birthday rolled around a few weeks later. For once, I decided to ask for something. I approached Dad cautiously. Hey, Dad? I was wondering, could I maybe get a laptop for my birthday? I could pick up some freelance work online, make some extra money. Before Dad could respond, Sarah swooped in, her face twisted with anger. A laptop? Are you serious, Alice? You're already living here rent-free, eating our food, and now you want more? Her voice dripped with venom. You're nothing but a money-grubbing freeloader. I stood there, shocked into silence, as she continued her tirade. Have you no shame? Your father just paid for your entire college education, and here you are, asking for more expensive gifts. She was on a roll now, tears springing to her eyes in a dramatic display. What about Tommy's future? At this rate, he'll never be able to go to college, because his greedy sister is bleeding us dry. Sarah, that's enough. Dad's voice cut through her performance. We have a separate account for Tommy's college fund. It's all taken care of, so please, calm down. Sarah huffed and stormed out of the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Dad sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. I'm sorry about that, Alice. We'll talk about the laptop later, okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As soon as I could, I escaped to the backyard, needing some air. Sitting on the old swing set, I let the tears I'd been holding back fall freely. Sarah's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. I wiped my eyes, a new resolve settling over me. I wouldn't ask for anything ever again. I'd find a way to make it on my own, without their help or their judgment. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, life decided to prove me wrong. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when all hell broke loose. Dad burst into the living room, his face red with fury. Where is it? He bellowed, making me jump. Where's my damn money? Sarah and Tommy came running, eyes wide with shock. I sat there, frozen, as Dad continued his tirade. Someone's been using my card. The one for Tommy's college fund. He was pacing now, hands shaking. Jewelry stores, electronics. Who the hell's been spending my money? His eyes landed on me, narrowing with suspicion. Alice, did you take my cards? Have you been in my wallet? I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. What? No, Dad, I would never. But he wasn't listening. He was on a rampage, tearing through the room like a tornado. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "John, check her backpack. It's right there." Before I could protest, Dad grabbed my bag. I watched in horror as he dumped its contents onto the couch. Books, papers, pens, and there, gleaming in the midst of it all, was a brand new laptop. The room fell silent. I stared at the laptop, my mind reeling. I hadn't bought this. Dad's voice was dangerously low. "You thieving little..." "Dad, no. I didn't do this," I pleaded, panic rising in my throat. "I don't know where that came from." "And jewelry? Why would I buy jewelry? Call the police. Check the store cameras. You'll see it wasn't me." But my words fell on deaf ears. Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "John, can't you see? She has no respect for you. She's lying to your face, even with the evidence right in front of her." She turned to me, eyes glinting with triumph. "We should have known you'd do something like this. Always wanting more, never satisfied with what you have." Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow. "Get out." "What?" I whispered, not believing what I was hearing. "Get out of my house," he roared. "You ungrateful. I never want to see you again. Get your things and leave now." Numbly, I gathered what I could. Clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. It all went into a duffel bag I found in the closet. The whole time, Dad stood there, watching me with a mixture of anger and disgust that broke my heart. As I headed for the door, Sarah's parting shot hit me. "We should have done this years ago. Good riddance to bad rubbish." The door slammed behind me, and just like that, I was alone. Homeless. Accused of a crime I didn't commit. As the reality of my situation sank in, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The house behind me had stopped being a home long ago. Maybe this was the push I needed to truly start my own life. That first night after being kicked out was a blur. I found myself in a dingy hostel, clutching my duffel bag like a lifeline. Sleep eluded me as I lay on the lumpy mattress, my mind racing with unanswered questions and fear for the future. The next day at work, I must have looked as lost as I felt. My colleague, Jessica, cornered me in the break room. "All right, spill it. What's going on with you?" she demanded, her concern evident. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid story. Jessica listened, her eyes widening with each new detail. "That's insane," she said when I finished. Then, without missing a beat, "Move in with me. I've been looking for a roommate anyway. We can split the rent. It'll be perfect." And just like that, I had a lifeline. I moved in with Jessica that weekend, grateful beyond words for her kindness. 2 years passed in a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, determined to prove to myself, and everyone else, that I could make it on my own. I didn't speak to Dad at all during this time. The pain of his betrayal was still too raw. Mom tried to reach out a few times, but our conversations were strained. It was clear Dad had told her about the alleged theft. Her disappointment was palpable, even over the phone. Eventually, those calls stopped too. But life has a way of moving forward, whether you're ready or not. I got promoted at work, started earning enough to consider my own place. I picked up new hobbies, yoga, painting, anything to keep my mind occupied. I even started dating again, though nothing serious. Finally, I took the plunge and rented my own apartment. It was small, but it was mine. No judgmental stares, no walking on eggshells. Just peace and independence. I was just settling into my new routine when the unexpected happened. There was a knock at my door one Saturday afternoon. I opened it, and there stood Dad. He looked older, more haggard than I remembered. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. "Can I come in?" he choked out. "Your mother gave me the address. Alice, I need to talk to you." I stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw him out like he'd done to me. But another part, a part one thought I'd buried, wanted desperately to hear what he had to say. Dad took a deep breath. I found out what really happened 2 years ago, he began, his voice shaking. It wasn't you. It was Sarah. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. What? He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. She framed you. She's the one who took my credit cards, who bought all that stuff. I found jewelry, clothes, all hidden away in her things. Price tags still on them and everything. I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Dad's words washed over me, each one a mix of vindication and reopened wounds. I sat there, stunned, as Dad continued his story. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and regret as he recounted the events that led to this moment. After I found the jewelry, I started paying closer attention, he said, running a hand through his graying hair. One night, I caught Sarah red-handed, going through my wallet. She was taking my credit cards, Alice. I felt a lump form in my throat. All this time, I'd been right. But the vindication tasted bitter. Dad went on, his words tumbling out faster now. I confronted her, and it all came spilling out. She's been shopping compulsively for years. At first, she said it was all for Tommy. But now? She's maxed out credit cards, taken out loans, all for stuff we don't need. I shook my head, disbelief warring with a perverse sense of satisfaction. And the laptop? The one you found in my bag? Dad's face crumpled. She planted it there. Bought it with my card and slipped it into your things. God, Alice, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. The apology hung in the air between us, heavy and insufficient. I told her she needed help, Dad continued. Begged her to see a therapist, to get treatment for her shopping addiction. But she refused. Said there was nothing wrong with her. I could picture it, Sarah, defiant and unapologetic. Just like she'd been the day they kicked me out. And then, Dad's voice dropped to a near whisper, she said she was right to frame you. That she'd do it again if she had the chance. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the couch, steadying myself. That was it for me, Dad said. I filed for divorce the next day. Kicked her out of the house. I couldn't live with someone who'd hurt my daughter like that. He looked at me then, his eyes pleading. Alice, I know I don't deserve it, but please, can you forgive me? I was blind, and stupid, and I hurt you so badly. I'm so sorry. I stared at him, this man who had once been my hero. The father who'd read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike. The same father who'd thrown me out without a second thought, who'd believed the worst of me so easily. For a moment, I was that scared, heartbroken girl again, standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. The pain of that betrayal washed over me anew. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't forgive you. Not now, maybe not ever. You didn't just kick me out. You believed I could do something so terrible. You didn't even try to hear my side. And for 2 years, Dad, you didn't call, didn't check if I was okay. Dad nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand, he choked out. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I needed you to know the truth. I stood up, suddenly needing space. Thank you for telling me, but I think you should go now. As the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, emotions overwhelming me. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like reopening a wound that had never really healed. After Dad left, I thought I'd finally have peace. But life had other plans. My phone started ringing incessantly, Mom, trying to play peacemaker. Alice, honey, she'd plead, your father is truly sorry. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him? Each call left me more frustrated than the last. Mom, please. I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But she wouldn't let up. One evening, I opened my door to find both my parents standing there. What are you doing here? I demanded, anger bubbling up inside me. Mom pushed past me into the apartment, Dad trailing behind looking sheepish. Alice, this has gone on long enough, she started, her voice stern. Your father made a mistake, but he's apologized. You have no right to hold this grudge. Think of all the good things he's done for you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No right? He kicked me out. He believed I was a thief. Where was all this support when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to rebuild my life? Mom opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. No, I'm done. Both of you, please leave. And don't come back. If you keep pushing this, I'll get a restraining order. I mean it. The shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation wasn't so painful. Mom looked like she wanted to yell, but Dad put a hand on her arm. We understand, Alice, he said quietly. We'll go. But I'll be here when you're ready. If you're ever ready. As the door closed behind them, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. I sank onto my couch, desperate for some peace to heal. Weeks passed. Life went on. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the mundane routine of everyday life. One day, while grabbing coffee, I spotted a familiar face, Sarah, my ex-stepmother. She was leaving a casino, phone pressed to her ear. I know I owe you, I overheard her say, but I'm sure I'll win it back this time. Just need a little more time. I ducked out of sight, a mix of pity and satisfaction washing over me. Her actions had cost her everything, yet she was still in denial. Tommy, my stepbrother, occasionally sent me text messages. Short, awkward exchanges that never went deep. He was in college now, trying to forge his own path. Like me, he seemed to be keeping his distance from the family drama. Months turned into a year. I met someone, Mark. Kind, funny, understanding Mark. As our relationship grew serious, he asked about my family. I told him everything. Wow, he said, holding me close. You've been through so much. Whatever you decide about your parents, I'm here for you. Now, as I sit here twirling the engagement ring on my finger, I'm faced with a decision I never thought I'd have to make. Our wedding is months away, and I still don't know if I want my parents there. Part of me wants to extend an olive branch, to see if we can build something new from the ashes of our old relationship. Another part is terrified of letting them back in, of making myself vulnerable again. I look at the save the date cards on my coffee table, 2 envelopes set aside, one for Mom, one for Dad. My pen hovers over them, indecision paralyzing me. In the end, I set the pen down. I'm not ready to make this decision yet, and that's okay. I've learned that healing takes time, and forgiveness can't be forced.